Chapter 132. Count Peter Belisai? Blanco's mouth was agape in shock. He had made a lot of guesses before, but he did not take little finger into consideration. He could not believe that two people who had almost no conflict of interest would actually want to kill the other, and even choose to frame him after failing to do so. Compared to the old mercenary's reaction, Zhang Cheng was undoubtedly much calmer. He merely curled his lips and muttered to himself, "So this is how you treat your friends? A probing assassination, and then framing Cersei Lannister. Using this method to create a rift between the Lannister family and me? You played it beautifully. I was almost fooled by you. Sir, are you sure she's speaking the truth?" Blanco came closer and stared into the girl's unfocused eyes. Of course, unless one has a will as firm as steel and cannot be swayed by external forces, no one can resist the power of a charm spell. With that, Zhang Cheng put away his pocket watch and raised his right hand to snap his fingers. "Huh!" After a crisp sound, Yana suddenly trembled, and her pupils began to focus quickly. In just half a minute, she regained consciousness and asked with a puzzled expression, What happened just now?" Zhang Cheng smiled cruelly and replied, "Ah, that's right. You said yourself that the mastermind was not Cersei Lannister, but Peter Belisai. I'm sorry, girl. Since you didn't grasp your last chance, I've decided to give you a small punishment." What? That's impossible. How could I? Knowing that her framing plan had been exposed, Yana was instantly terrified. She tried to snatch the bottle of potion that shone with a strange light several times, but in the end, she did not dare to make a move. Seeing the girl's face filled with despair, Zhang Cheng suddenly turned to ask the old mercenary, "Blanco, if I remember correctly, you mentioned that the mercenaries hiding in the cave were very bored and lonely, and needed some stimulation, right?" "Yes, sir. They are now as thirsty as a pack of ferocious beasts." Blanco obviously realized something, and an evil and lascivious expression appeared on his face. "All right, in order to give this group of thirsty beasts a channel to vent, you could bring this girl over. Remember to tell them to be gentle when using it. If they accidentally break it or kill it, then they can only use their hands to solve their physiological problems." Just as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng moved at lightning speed, grabbing the girl's slender neck and pouring the potion down her throat. In the blink of an eye, her pale face regained some color. At the same time, she stopped coughing and vomiting blood. There was no doubt that as long as the potion healed her damaged internal organs, even the burns on her abdomen would heal. However, Maya was not happy about this at all. She struggled desperately and begged, "No, no, no, please don't. Please give me another chance." "I'm sorry. I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. Now, you need to find another way to repay me for saving your life. Don't worry, it's just a few hundred thirsty mercenaries. As long as you persevere, maybe you can survive." After saying that, Zhang Cheng mercilessly broke the girl's wrist. Crack, crack. Along with the crisp sound of bones breaking, Yana immediately let out a painful scream. But before she could scream, Blanco, who was waiting by the side, immediately rushed over and stuffed a piece of cloth in her mouth. Then, he took out a rope from nowhere and tied the girl up. After everything was settled, the old mercenary began to wander between the girl's smooth thighs and full breasts. At the same time, he asked greedily, "Sir, if you don't mind, can I have a taste of her before you hand her over to those thirsty mercenaries?" "Up to you. You can make your own decision on such a small matter." Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. He knew that there were only two purposes in life for mercenaries. One was to drink good wine and enjoy good food, and the other was to sleep with all kinds of women. "Hee, you are the most generous and compassionate master I have ever seen. To be able to serve you is the greatest fortune of my life." Blanco placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. "All right, she's just a slightly prettier ordinary girl. I promise that as long as you follow me loyally, you will have the chance to taste those noble ladies and madams. Now do something for me." Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a chilling light. "Please give your orders." The old mercenary realized that his master was a little angry. He immediately bowed respectfully to show his humility. Go and hire the best assassin you can find. Kill Lisa Tully for me. Remember, it must be done before Stannis arrives at King's Landing. Here, this is a bottle of dragon fire. It can help the assassin complete the mission better. Zhang Chung ordered expressionlessly. Obviously, what he wanted was revenge. To be precise, he wanted to destroy the most crucial part of Littlefinger's near-perfect plan. Without Lisa Tully, Peter Baelish would not be able to obtain the right to rule the valley through marriage. He would also not be able to realize his grand plan to unify the North and finally ascend the throne to become the king of the Seven Kingdoms. Zhang Chung really wanted to see how this master schemer would react when the news of Lisa Tully's death spread. Would he fly into a rage? Or would he activate another backup plan? Blanco carefully took the red bottle and put it into his pocket. He replied with a serious expression, "Don't worry, I will take care of this matter. But I don't understand. What does killing Lisa Tully have to do with taking revenge on Count Peter Baelish?" Believe me, as long as you kill Lisa Tully, Peter Baelish will immediately appear. At that time, you will understand how important this woman is to him. With that, Zhang Chung ignored everyone and walked straight to his room. As the well water dwindled, he urgently needed to find a replacement. Otherwise, when the last bottle was used up, he could only wield the magic sword, the soul catcher, and completely rely on the Dark Knight profession template to fight head-on. Perhaps the danger of doing so was not too great when magic had completely disappeared. But now was the season of magic's revival. All sorts of inconceivable spells and dragons would appear in the Song of Ice and Fire season. Chapter 133. In the last month of year 298 of the Aegon calendar, Stannis Baratheon had finally completed the integration of the Lords of the Stormlands. He led a vanguard of more than 20,000 men and arrived outside King's Landing. Most of them were the most elite knights and free riders. At the same time, he ordered his trusted aide, Sir Imry Florin, to lead a large fleet and surround the capital of the Seven Kingdoms by water. Since then, King's Landing was completely cut off from the outside world. The soldiers and citizens in the city had to rely on their limited reserves to survive. In particular, the price of food had long exceeded the limits of what most people could afford. A piece of black bread that was usually worth half a copper now cost several silver deers. As someone who had stockpiled a large amount of food in advance, Zhang Chung naturally wouldn't let go of such a chance to make a fortune. He immediately ordered Blanco to secretly sell off a portion of his reserves. In a short 2 to 3 days, his wealth had rapidly increased from a few thousand gold royals to more than 400,000 gold royals. Of course, these 400,000 gold royals weren't all gold, silver, and other precious metals. There were also many other things like gems, handmade carpets, spices, horses, armor, and weapons as collateral. As for the price, it was naturally as low as it could go. Some were basically robbing in the open. After all, when people were hungry, they would often lose their rationality. All they could think about was how to fill their stomachs. Zhang Chung used this to his advantage and wantonly plundered the wealth of the people to expand his own forces and prepare for his next plan. However, these happy days didn't last long. Stannis, who had come from afar, rested for a while before immediately launching an attack on the weakly defended King's Landing. Accompanied by shouts and battle cries, the most important battle that would determine the ownership of the Iron Throne, the Battle of Blackwater River, had finally begun. Do you see that? My dear friend, this is the fleet that Stannis is so proud of. We have to destroy it before it causes enough damage. Otherwise, with our current forces, we won't be able to hold on for more than 3 days. Tyrion stood on top of the city wall, looking at the approaching warships on the water with a grave expression. Zhang Chung used a sharp gaze to sweep across the nervous city guards and nodded with a smile. I completely agree with your point of view. Tell me, what are your plans, and what do you need me to do? It's simple. I plan to use wildfire to deal a heavy blow to Stannis' fleet and force him to fight a prolonged siege with us. Your mission is to try your best to surround the escaping warships from behind and make sure that you sink them before they escape into the sea, the imp explained straightforwardly. Although this was not his first time participating in a cruel war, it was his first time commanding a war from the perspective of a decision-maker. One could imagine the nervousness in his heart. Don't worry. I promise that tonight will be the doomsday of this fleet. No matter how they struggle and howl, they will not be able to escape the fate of death, Zhang Cheng promised meaningfully. Really? Tilly raised his eyebrows in surprise, obviously not believing it. Someone once said that any verbal threat is far less powerful than a clean and efficient action. There are still 3 hours before nightfall. You will understand what I mean in 3 hours. After saying that, Zhang Cheng slightly bowed and left the city wall with his subordinates. Before they had walked more than 10 meters, Blanco immediately asked impatiently, "Sir, is it time to act?" "Yes. Go inform the mercenaries to prepare for battle. If they are lucky, their names will be left behind in history after tonight. At the same time, they will also receive a large amount of wealth." Zhang Cheng replied without hesitation. "Understood. I will go inform them now." The old mercenary bowed and disappeared into the small alley around the corner. When the last ray of the sun disappeared from the horizon, King's Landing finally welcomed the dark night. At the same time, it was also the signal for both sides to start the war. Before the citizens in the city could react to what had happened, the deafening sound of war drums and battle cries immediately reverberated in the sky above the city. Following that, a rain of arrows and rocks drew beautiful arcs, landing on the city walls or near the houses near the city walls. In an instant, screams, wails, and the terrified cries of women and children mixed together, showing the harm that war brought to the civilians. But unfortunately, no one here cared about their lives. Standing at the hidden entrance of a cave by the sea, Zhang Cheng was admiring the scene of flames soaring into the sky hundreds of meters away. At the same time, he gently stroked the anxious dragon whelp beside him and comforted it softly. "Calm down. It's not your turn yet." "Roar." The dragon whelp let out a low howl, its violet eyes filled with undisguised excitement. Just as Zhang Cheng was about to say something, Blanco suddenly rushed in from outside, panting as he reported, "Sir, our men have boarded the ships and are ready to attack at any time. We are now waiting for your orders. Be patient. We have to wait for Tyrion to finish his performance before it is our turn to take the stage. Look, the beautiful fireworks show is about to begin." As he spoke, Zhang Cheng quickly turned his gaze to the water in the distance. He saw the huge fleet slowly approaching the city's docks in order to coordinate with Stannis' attack from the ground. They did not realize that a huge trap had opened its mouth, waiting for their arrival. In order to attract more enemy ships into the ambush area, the imp did not hesitate to send out the few remaining royal fleet to fight with a large number of enemy ships near the mouth of the Blackwater River. When the two sides were about to enter the chaotic stage, he immediately ordered his men to pull up a huge iron chain net that had been prepared long ago, firmly trapping all the ships, and then gave the order to throw wildfire. The next second, boom, 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 canisters with deadly green flames were thrown into the water one by the catapults, and in just a few seconds, the entire river became a living hell. More than half of the ships were destroyed in an instant by the wildfire, and some desperately fled towards the sea, afraid that they would accidentally follow in the footsteps of the unlucky ones. "Oh my God, this is terrifying." Blanco could not help but shudder, his eyes filled with awe and fear. "How is it? Isn't it spectacular? Let's go. It's time for our performance. Remember, do not chase after the ships that escaped into the sea. I need to train this little guy's combat ability." As he spoke, Zhang Cheng patted the young dragon's forehead, raised his arm, and made a gesture of taking off. When the young dragon saw it, it immediately spread its wings and soared into the sky. Chapter 134. Oh! Before the sailor could react to what had happened, he felt a scorching flame surround him, followed by an indescribable pain. Following his screams, the wooden sailboat quickly caught on fire, like a giant torch on the water, reminding the surviving ships that they were still far from being out of danger. The young dragon did not stop after its successful attack. It followed its master's instructions and once again ascended into the sky, using the cover of the night to search for its next target. In order to prevent it from becoming one of the 3 stupid dragons under Daenerys Targaryen, Zhang Cheng had put in a lot of effort, constantly teaching it what it meant to have the advantage of being in the air and having the advantage of mobility. As a dragon, the most important thing was not to rely on its sturdy scales, sharp claws, and teeth to face the enemy head-on. Instead, it had to use its advantage of being able to fly to first eliminate the enemies that were alone and had no ability to resist. After cleaning up the small fries, it would then slowly deal with the most dangerous enemies. Under the influence of its master, this shameless young dragon finally learned how to pick on the weak first. In just a short while, it had sent all the lone warships that had escaped from the main force into another world. When there were no longer any lone ships around, it stayed in the dark night sky, patiently waiting for its master's signal. At the same time, Zhang Cheng personally commanded 2 warships, slowly approaching the remaining fleet of Stannis. In order to increase the element of surprise, his ship did not hang any flags, nor did it have oil lamps, torches, or any other lighting tools. All he had was a group of bloodthirsty mercenaries. "My lord, there are 3 enemy warships ahead. Are we going to engage in a boarding battle, or are we going to destroy them with wildfire?" The 40-year-old captain asked in a low voice. Zhang Cheng playfully glanced at the sailors and mercenaries behind him, then smiled and asked, "What do you think? Is it more interesting to burn the enemy to death, or to stab the enemy with a sword and enjoy their painful screams and wails?" "Oh, right, I forgot to tell you one thing. In this battle, no matter what you snatch, it will belong to you. I only want to capture warships." Really? No matter what we snatch, it will belong to us?" A mercenary's eyes instantly emitted a terrifying green light. "Of course, but there was one thing. If I find out that someone is fighting over the spoils of war, then I will beat him up like an enemy. Do you understand?" Zhang Cheng warned in a serious tone. Hee, don't worry, we understand." Another mercenary cracked a smile. "Boarding battle, boarding battle, boarding battle." The mercenaries and sailors made their choice as the shouts got louder and louder. To them, war meant not only death, but also wealth. This kind of public robbery, which did not require any legal liability, was what they liked to do the most. In addition, after hiding in the dark cave for so long, everyone urgently needed to vent, and killing happened to be the most ideal channel to vent their emotions. Without a doubt, the captain had sensed the wild beast hidden under the human appearance. Without another word, he turned the ship around and headed straight for the enemy's ship. Not to be outdone, the other ship also charged from the left. Since the Song of Ice and Fire did not have cannons, naval warfare was still in a primitive state. Every ship was equipped with long and thick rams, and the only way to attack was to ram the enemy. Then, the soldiers on the ships would engage in hand-to-hand combat until the last person on the enemy ship was killed. Unlike land battles, the enemy had no way to retreat. Usually, they would fight to the death, and the degree of devastation and casualties were frighteningly high. However, Zhang Cheng clearly did not want to lose too many of his men. He took the initiative to unsheath his evil sword and stood at the very front. His style of taking the lead undoubtedly boosted the morale of his men. Coupled with the exquisite plate armor of the Dark Knight, everyone around him felt inexplicably at ease. "Hey, who are you? Why aren't you flying your flag?" A sailor on a ship belonging to Stannis shouted at the top of his voice. Unfortunately, the surroundings were still as quiet as ever. No one paid him any attention. Realizing that something was wrong, the sailor immediately warned his companions. Enemy on our port side. Prepare for battle." As soon as he finished speaking, the ram slammed into the hull of the ship, and 7 or 8 unlucky men who lost their footing fell into the water. Many more hit their heads on the deck or the mast, their eyes rolling back as they fell unconscious. "Kill!" Zhang Cheng leaped onto the ship and swung the Soul Hunter around, cutting a youth wielding a scimitar in half at the waist. Blood and innards splattered everywhere. "Ha ha! Kill!" Kill all these idiots. The mercenaries behind him laughed maniacally, chopping down another sailor with their axes. In the blink of an eye, more than 30 skilled mercenaries swarmed onto the deck of the enemy ship and began a massacre of the unprepared enemies. After all, Stannis' fleet had just suffered a disastrous defeat. Most of them were still in shock and low spirits. But what about these mercenaries? They hid in their caves and trained every day, eating and sleeping. They were full of energy. Coupled with the excitement of being able to plunder spoils of war, it was as if they had been injected with stimulants. Apart from that, the mercenaries who had participated in all kinds of battles were far more experienced than the sailors who had barely seen blood. That was why they were able to defeat their opponents in a single blow. In just 10 minutes, more than half of the 200 sailors on the ship were dead or injured. In order to survive, the rest threw down the weapons in their hands and knelt on the ground with their hands raised in surrender. Zhang Cheng ignored these captives who had lost their will to resist and swung onto the deck of the second ship with the help of a rope. He raised his magic sword and slashed the captain into 2 halves. The dazzling blood instantly dyed the black armor red, adding a touch of ferocity to it, especially the large number of souls that were killed and imprisoned. They surrounded the sword, forming a black fog that was visible to the naked eye. They constantly let out ear-piercing screams of pain. Even a fool could feel the ominous and sinister aura of the sword. Tell me, do you choose to surrender or to die? Zhang Cheng used a cold voice to issue an ultimatum. He could feel that as the number of enemies he killed increased, the power of the soul hunter grew stronger. It even urged him, its master, to continue the slaughter. Chapter 135. There were no surprises. The sailors who had lost their captain quickly chose between fighting to the death and surrendering. They didn't want to experience the consequences of that strange longsword on their bodies. Just as Zhang Cheng was starting to lose control of the strong killing intent that surged from the bottom of his heart, Blanco had also finished occupying another ship. He jumped over with 20 men and wiped the blood off his face as he said with a serious expression, "Knight, I think we have to stop hunting the enemy's fleet." What's wrong? Zhang Cheng quickly shook his head and chased those terrifying thoughts and voices out of his mind. There, look. The old mercenary pointed at the blazing battlefield not far away. Stannis used the wreckage of the burned ships to build a pontoon bridge. He has already led his most elite knights to attack the city gates. If we don't hurry back to reinforce them, King's Landing will fall soon. Following the direction he pointed, Zhang Cheng immediately discovered that thousands of soldiers had already climbed up the city walls and were fighting with the golden robes of the city defense. For some reason, the gold robes, who had the advantage of the terrain, were forced to retreat. In the blink of an eye, they had lost a large part of the city wall and were forced into independent gatehouses one after another. In more technical terms, they were surrounded and divided. Perhaps they wouldn't be completely wiped out in a short period of time, but the situation was obviously extremely disadvantageous for the defending side. Damn it, didn't the reports say that Stannis only had 20,000 men in the vanguard? Zhang Cheng subconsciously frowned. Even though it was difficult to accurately count the number of soldiers on both sides during the chaotic battle, the attacking side clearly had more than 20,000 men. In addition to the dense reserves behind them, forget about 20,000 men, there were probably more than 30 to 40,000 men. One had to know that the terrain of King's Landing was very special. To the south was the Blackwater River, and to the east was the Blackwater Bay. Stannis had led the army from Storm's End Castle and was definitely at the south of King's Landing. If he wanted to attack the city, he would have to rely on the Navy to continuously transport the soldiers over. However, the little devil had seen through his plan and had made sufficient preparations in advance. She had used wildfire to severely damage the fleet. Not only had she killed a large number of soldiers on the ships, but she had also reduced the efficiency of the transportation, making it impossible to transport a large number of soldiers to the other side at once. Similarly, Stannis reacted very quickly. When the fleet suffered a devastating blow, he immediately ordered his men to piece the wreckage of the ships together and build a simple pontoon bridge. The reinforcements continued to use the pontoon bridge to surge toward the weakest city walls. In less than an hour or two, they had occupied a large portion of the outer city walls. "Sir, now, please make a decision." Blanco lowered his voice and hinted, "Decisiveness? You don't think that Lannister has lost this battle, do you?" Zhang Chung took off his helmet and asked with a half-smile, "Isn't that so? I really don't see how Sir Tyrion can turn the situation around. Perhaps giving up on the outskirts of the city and taking the initiative to retreat to the Red Fort is a good choice." The old mercenary gave his evaluation based on his past battle experience. Zhang Chung smiled and shook his head. "Of course not. Don't forget, Tyrion is only a pawn placed in the south by his father, Tywin Lannister. Think carefully. How long has Stannis been in King's Landing? Have you heard the route of his army?" Blanco was obviously not a fool. He quickly realized the hidden meaning in Brendel's words and probed with an uncertain tone. "You mean, Duke Tywin is leading the army of House Lannister in ambush nearby, waiting for the best time to pay tribute?" Zhang Chung did not directly answer the question. Instead, he suddenly sighed. "Do you know? The way I see it, there are two kinds of heroes in this world. One is the one who inspires people in desperate times so that they will never give up hope. However, they usually have short lives and often die under the sword of the enemy before the good times come. I admire this kind of hero, but I will never emulate them. As for the second kind of hero, they will always appear at the most critical moment and defeat the enemy with overwhelming force, then receive the cheers and praise of the people and reap the greatest benefits in the process. Tell me, which kind do you think Duke Tywin is?" "I think he should be the latter." Blanco recalled the various deeds of Tywin Lannister and immediately came to his own conclusion. "That's right. Since you know what kind of person he is, then what are you worried about? Lock the captives in the hold and inform everyone to prepare for battle. Let us begin the prelude to this heroic ceremony for Tywin Lannister." Zhang Cheng's lips curled up as he spoke. He began to remove the blood-stained armor one by one, replacing it with a flint staff that he had not used for a long time. It was obvious that he was going to let loose and display the incomparable destructive power of a mage in front of everyone. Under the command of the old mercenary, the 5 warships that were tangled together quickly separated. 2 of the warships that had been impaled by the ram were left where they were to hold the surrendered captives. The other 3, after some simple repairs, hung the flag of Stannis again and rushed towards the battlefield. "Look, our ships!" a sharp-eyed knight shouted at his companions. However, before the others could react, a buzzing sound suddenly came from the air. Immediately after, a dense rain of arrows fell from the sky, hitting the armors and shields. Some of the arrows even penetrated the armor and pierced into the fragile flesh of the players. Not good. It's an enemy ship. Defensive formation. Defensive formation." Accompanied by noisy curses and shouts, the army that belonged to Stannis on the shore quickly changed direction and gathered into a tight semicircular infantry formation. Seeing this, Zhang Chung revealed a sinister smile. He turned to the sailor in charge of operating the catapults and instructed, "What are you waiting for? Begin." "Hee, as you wish, my lord." The sailor grinned as he released the lever. In an instant, dozens of sealed cans of wildfire were thrown out and smashed in a shield wall. The dark green liquid instantly splashed everywhere. Before the soldiers could figure out what was going on, a blazing flame streaked across the sky and landed on the ground. The next second, boom, the violent explosion and flames engulfed hundreds of soldiers on the spot. The sturdy armor and shields that they were so proud of were not of any use at this moment. Instead, they were turned into lethal molten iron by the flames. Chapter 136. Don't stop. Continue. The tragic sight of hundreds of people being burned alive did not affect Zhang Chung at all. He continued to command the warships to destroy the enemy along the riverbank. The tactic was simple. That was to use a rain of arrows to force the enemy into a tight formation, then use sealed wildfire to burn the gathered enemies to death. Because of Stannis' warships, they had all fled to the outer seas because of the destructive attack, and the ones that were left behind were burned by the young dragons hiding in the night sky. Thus, they could not rush back to help in time and could only watch helplessly as the three ships wreaked havoc on the water. Seeing that his attack was blocked, the king's face instantly turned gloomy. He suppressed his anger and asked sternly, "What is going on with those ships? I don't care what method you use. Kill them immediately. King's Landing is right in front of us. I will not allow anyone to block the path of the army." But your majesty, the fate of the fleet commander, Sir Imry Florin, is unknown. There is no one who can let the frightened sailors return to the battlefield. A noble wearing armor carefully reminded. But just as he finished speaking, the two warships that were wandering around the river bank finally came to their senses and quickly turned back into the river. It was obvious that they were trying to use the sturdy ram to stop Zhang Cheng from continuing to slaughter the defenseless soldiers along the riverbank. When Stannis noticed this, he immediately sneered and mocked. "Humph. Did you see that, sir? There are always people in this world who have extraordinary courage and loyalty. They will—" Before he could finish his words, a black shadow suddenly flashed past. A few seconds later, bright flames lit up the night sky. The two warships that came to the rescue did not even have time to enter the riverbank before they completely turned into two huge balls of fire. Because the entire process was too fast, no one could see clearly what had happened. Such a strange scene, not to mention the warships that were also preparing to enter the riverbank. Even Stannis was stunned. Even though after spending some time with Melisandre, he had already realized that there were some mysterious powers in the world that he did not understand, such as shadow magic, fire magic, prophecy magic, and so on. But these were not as unbelievable as instantly igniting a warship. "Damn it, order the soldiers on the walls to open the gates. Then let the cavalry charge. A mere 3 ships cannot stop my advance." After a short moment of silence, Stannis immediately made a new decision. In any case, it was impossible for a mere 3 ships to carry that many soldiers, and it was even more impossible for them to land easily. That was no different from suicide. The only thing they could do was to harass. As long as his attack speed was fast enough, he could take down King's Descent City first, and then use the huge catapult on the city walls to destroy the enemy. "As you wish, your majesty." The messenger bowed with one hand on his chest and blew the horn in his hand. Woo, woo, woo. As the low sound of the bugle horn spread throughout the battlefield, the rear of the camp immediately became restless. In less than 10 minutes, a knight holding the flag high took the lead, jumping onto the pontoon bridge and charging towards King's Landing City that had opened up. Following closely behind him were thousands of other cavalrymen. For a moment, the entire earth shook violently. The city guards on the city walls, who had been stubbornly resisting, all revealed expressions of despair when they sensed the roaring flood. One had to know that in Westeros, cavalry had been the undisputed kings of the battlefield since ancient times. Apart from the dragons of House Targaryen, there was nothing that could stop their frontal assault. In addition, the Golden Robes weren't elite troops to begin with. Especially in recent times, in order to expand their numbers, many local ruffians had taken the opportunity to sneak in. Their combat strength was frighteningly low. Now that they saw an endless horde of cavalry, they threw down their weapons without a word and began to flee in all directions. Only an extremely small number of soldiers loyal to House Lannister were still doing their best to resist the enemy that outnumbered them by several times. Zhang Cheng, standing at the bow of the ship, didn't say a word as he felt the despairing yet mesmerizing atmosphere of the battlefield. After a few minutes, he turned around and ordered, "Stop the ship. No matter what you see or hear, don't make any noise and don't disturb me. Do you understand?" "Understood, sir. I will personally guard by your side." Blanco seemed to have realized what was about to happen and gave a serious promise. "Very good." Zhang Cheng nodded in satisfaction. He gripped his firestone staff tightly with one hand and raised a runestone high up in the air with the other. Then, he loudly chanted an incantation. As this wasn't the world of Azeroth, he could only rely on the arcane energy stored in his body to complete this large-scale spell. so the preparation time was exceptionally long. When nearly a quarter of the cavalry had charged through the city gates, a large patch of dark clouds condensed in the sky. At the same time, an inexplicable chill suddenly began to surround the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, a thin layer of ice had formed on the surface of the water. "Oh my God!" The old mercenary subconsciously shivered, his eyes filled with shock. As for the sailors and mercenaries on the ship, they were so frightened that they immediately knelt down, staring at Zhang Cheng with reverence and worship. In their minds, only a god could do something as inconceivable as changing the weather. The next second, countless white dots fell from the sky and smashed countless charging cavalrymen off their horses. These white dots weren't anything else. They were icicles the size of an adult's fist. Some of the unlucky ones had their helmets pierced by the icicles and died on the spot. Others had their limbs broken, shoulder blades broken, or their horses injured. In any case, they couldn't continue fighting. It was clear that the spell Zhang Cheng had cast was the famous Blizzard of Azeroth. It was also one of the most popular large-scale killing spells of mages. He very cleverly chose the opposite side of the pontoon bridge as the location to cast the spell. In a short while, hundreds of knights had been smashed to death or crippled. More importantly, because there were too many people falling, they formed a large natural barrier, causing the cavalry behind to trip and fall to the ground, following in the footsteps of the former. A very small number of people who tried to rein in their horses were also pushed into the river by the people behind them, drowning in a short while. Chapter 137. The deadly icicles did not last for long. When the arcane energy was completely exhausted, the dark clouds above the battlefield finally dispersed, leaving behind a sea of white corpses covered in frost. At this moment, whether it was Stannis on the attacking side or the Golden Robe men on the defending side, they all held their breaths at the same time. They stared at the unbelievable scene in front of them, unable to regain their senses for a long time. The originally noisy battlefield, apart from the sound of the flowing river and the painful groans of the wounded, there was no other sound. It was as if everyone had been frozen in place. Feeling the empty magic in his body, Zhang Cheng casually threw away the runestone that had lost its luster. Leaning on his flint staff, he asked in a half-joking tone, "How was it? I did pretty well, didn't I?" "More than pretty well. Your performance just now was like that of a god." "Sorry, I don't know what to say right now. After tonight's battle, you will soon become the most popular legendary figure in the Seven Kingdoms. In the future, no matter who sits on the Iron Throne, they will give you the highest treatment." Blanco replied incoherently. Because he was too agitated, his slightly aged face turned black with a hint of red. As an old mercenary, no one knew better than him how terrifying this kind of large-scale, ultra-long-range attack was. Especially when the battle was in a stalemate, a single attack could often decide the victor and the loser. Is that so? This is the result I wanted." Zhang Cheng pretended to smile mysteriously. At the same time, he put his hand into his waist pouch and touched the 2 remaining bottles of well water. Obviously, the reason why he chose to unreservedly display his strongest side at this moment was completely out of helplessness. It was just like how some creatures in the natural world would choose to inflate their body like a balloon when they encountered danger, in order to scare away their natural enemies. Even though Zhang Cheng had not encountered any real danger for the time being, in order to avoid any possible trouble and to make those who were ready to make trouble behave, he chose to display his strength at an appropriate time. In this way, anyone who wanted to do something in the future would have to consider whether it was worth it to provoke a dangerous person with powerful supernatural powers for no reason. At the same time, he could also rely on his performance and personal strength to gain more benefits after the war. "My lord, I wonder if I have the honor of pledging my loyalty to you. I swear, I'm willing to give up everything for you, even our lives." A trembling mercenary took 2 steps forward and knelt down on one knee as he bowed respectfully. Me too. Me too." In the blink of an eye, countless people were kneeling on the deck. Perhaps as the famous French social psychologist Gustave, as Le Pen described, most of the time, the people were stupid, short-sighted, and irrational. especially when it came to things and phenomena that they couldn't understand at all. They would either desperately slander them or inexplicably worship them crazily. Looking at the pairs of eyes filled with fanaticism, Zhang Cheng's lips curved into an unnoticeable arc. Just as he was about to say something, a rumbling sound came from afar. Following that, countless knights charged from the back of Stannis' camp. In just a few minutes, the camp was flattened, scattering the soldiers who had yet to cross the river to join the battle. Obviously, the old lion, Tywin Lannister, who had been hiding in the dark waiting for an opportunity, finally made his move. Along with the battle cries, Stannis' army that had been fighting bitterly for an entire night was defeated. In addition, a person who resembled Renly appeared on the battlefield, instantly causing the Storm Lords to lose their will to resist. When the sun rose from the horizon once again, the curtains fell on the battle inside and outside the city. Stannis Baratheon, who claimed to have an army of 100,000, in reality, it was only 60 to 70,000 men, was almost completely wiped out. In the end, he led less than 5,000 men and fled the battlefield. "You are Sir Mason Asplin?" As soon as the battle ended, old Tywin couldn't wait to find Zhang Cheng. "That's right, it's me, your grace." Zhang Cheng smiled and bowed. After a simple greeting, the two of them looked at each other without saying a word. After a full minute, a rare smile appeared on old Tywin's serious face. "I have to admit, your performance has far exceeded my expectations. I believe you know what I'm talking about, right?" "Of course, your grace. I can understand the reaction of most commoners after seeing the power of magic with their own eyes. But you're Tywin Lannister. You shouldn't be the same as commoners, right?" Zhang Cheng blinked knowingly. "No, of course not. On the contrary, I value the power you possess, especially in this time of war. Oh, by the way, if I remember correctly, you seem to have an engagement with Aero Tyrell." Old Tywin suddenly changed the topic for some reason. Although he didn't know what Tywin's intentions were, Zhang Cheng still nodded. "Yes, we originally planned to hold the wedding after the tournament. Unfortunately, King Robert's death disrupted everything." Tywin stared with his two pale green eyes, as if trying to see through the young man's thoughts. After about 2 to 3 minutes, he suggested, "Please forgive my bluntness, but Aero Tyrell is only an insignificant member of the Side family. She's not worthy of you at all. If you don't mind, can I arrange a better marriage partner for you?" "Oh, why are you suddenly concerned about my marriage? Could it be?" Zhang Cheng purposely dragged out his words, a playful expression on his face. It was obvious that although Lannister had temporarily chosen to form an alliance with Tyrell, it wasn't a stable one. Both sides were wary of each other and were constantly up to their sleeves. As someone who wielded great supernatural power, he would naturally become one of the targets that both sides fought over and tried to rope in. "Don't play dumb, young man. You should know what I mean. We don't have much time. You must give me an accurate answer before the Imperial Conference is held in the city," Tywin urged with a serious expression. As he spoke, he even turned around and glanced at Knight of Flowers Loras and his brother Garland, who was disguised as Renly. Chapter 138. Dong, dong, dong. As the melodious sound of the bell spread throughout the city, King's Landing, which had been baptized by the flames of war, finally welcomed the long-awaited victory. As the king on the surface, Joffrey held an imperial conference in the Hall of the Iron Throne, intending to express his gratitude to his meritorious subjects. Of course, the content had already been drafted by Tywin Lannister and given to his daughter, Cersei, who would then pass it on to her son in a discreet manner. The only thing Joffrey had to do was to split the benefits for the winners of the power game, according to the list. It was truly tragic for a king to have to do this. Even the command of the remaining city guards was not in his hands, but in the hands of the Lannister family. However, he did not seem to have any objections to this. He still had a smug smile on his face as he said to Tywin, "My grandfather, the Shield of Lannisport and the Guardian of the West, Duke of Casterly Rock, thank you for destroying the rebel army at the crucial moment. In the name of the king, I appoint you as the Prime Minister and grant you the honor of being the savior of King's Landing." "Thank you very much, Your Majesty." Tywin bowed slightly on his horse. And you, my dear Sir Mason, you displayed extraordinary courage and wisdom in the battle last night, even stopping the rebel cavalry at one point. I now officially strip the Florentine family of their titles, lands, and income and transfer them to you. I hope that you will continue to be loyal to the king in the future." When he said this, Geoffrey's tone was obviously fawning. He knew very well that the power of the person standing in front of him had nothing to do with authority, so he was not bound by any authority. "Thank you for your generosity, Your Majesty." Zhang Cheng also bowed. Even though in his eyes, Geoffrey was basically a pile of dog shit, as long as this pile of dog shit could bring him enough benefits, he did not mind playing along with Geoffrey's acting skills. "Wait, Your Majesty," Loras Tyrell suddenly spoke up just as Geoffrey was about to announce the reward for the next meritorious subject. Sir Loras, do you have any objections?" Geoffrey's face flashed with displeasure. Loras Tyrell hurriedly shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. I just feel that this is far from enough to commend Sir Mason's achievements. We should include all the lands at the source of Honey River. After all, the Florentine family and their vassals have all betrayed you and the kingdom. It is only right that they be deprived of their lands and properties as rewards." "That's right, Your Majesty. The Florentine family has always thought highly of themselves and often disobeyed the kingdom's leadership. I even heard that they recently abandoned the seven gods and changed their faith to the Light King, R. Harlow. If such a blatant act of treachery is not punished, more ambitious fellows will soon follow suit," Galen Tyrell said in agreement. He did not need to ask to know that the purpose of this pair of brothers was to use this opportunity to uproot the Florentine family and its affiliated forces that had always opposed him. One had to know that the enmity between the two families wasn't just a matter of a day or two. Instead, it had lasted for hundreds of years, and it had long since become irreconcilable. Now that one side had been swept into the camp of the losers, the other side naturally wanted to kick them while they were down and completely expel them from the River Bend area. At the same time, they also wanted to consolidate their leadership position. Tywin Lannister glanced at the real ruler of the High Court, Alina Redwyn, who was known as the Queen of Thorns, from the corner of his eye. He was trying to figure out from her expression whether this vicious move was a spontaneous one or a premeditated one. Unfortunately, the skinny and old Alina Redwyn was not someone to be trifled with either. Apart from a smile, there was no sign of her emotions at all. But won't this incite the local nobles to resist with all their might? Geoffrey asked with uncertainty. Perhaps he had a huge flaw in his character, but it did not mean that he was a fool who did not know anything. He understood the severe consequences of stripping a large number of nobles of their lands. "Please do not worry, Your Majesty. As the highest commander of the Riverbend area, the Tyrell family will be responsible for eliminating anyone who dares to start a rebellion," Loras promised solemnly. Geoffrey hesitated for a few seconds before nodding lightly in the end. "All right, then strip the Florentine family of all their vassals of their lands and reward them to Sir Mason." "Sir Mason, do you have any objections to this?" "Of course not. As for the possibility of a rebellion, there is no need to trouble Duke Mason. I can handle it myself," Zhang Cheng said as he slightly raised the flint staff in his hand. The meaning of his words was self-evident. There's no need to be polite. After you and AI Luo get married, we'll be family. If you don't need an army, we can provide some other things, such as food supplies, armor, and weapons, Loras Tyrell said with a smile. "In that case, it would be impolite of me to refuse." Zhang Cheng generously accepted the other party's invitation. After all, the Tyrell family had ruled the River Bend area for hundreds of years and accumulated an uncountable amount of wealth. This wealth would belong to him sooner or later, so there was no difference whether he took it over earlier or later. Loras Tyrell was very happy that Zhang Cheng did not reject him. He turned around and bowed to Geoffrey. "Your Majesty, I have a presumptuous request." "Oh, please speak. You and your family have defeated the rebels. No matter what it is, I can agree to any request." Geoffrey pretended to be generous as he replied. "My sister, Margaret Tyrell, admires you greatly. I wonder if you would be willing to marry her." Loras said as he raised his right arm and pulled his beautiful young sister out of the crowd. There was no doubt that the 16-year-old Margaret Tyrell was an undeniably beautiful woman. She had soft, fluffy brown hair and beautiful eyes. Her body was curvaceous, and not only did she have the youthful vitality of a young girl, she also had an additional sense of seduction. Furthermore, she had been taught by her grandmother, Alina Redwin, for a long time, so she was very good at winning over people's hearts. Zhang Cheng stood in the crowd, silently admiring this scheming girl. His eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness. Then he quietly came to Littlefinger's side and said in a low voice, "Dear Lord Peter, I wonder if you are satisfied with the gift I sent you." Gift? Baelish subconsciously furrowed his brows. Chapter 139. The Imperial Conference didn't last long. It ended after all the benefits had been divided. In the end, Peter Baelish was granted the title of Herrenberg for facilitating the alliance between House Lannister and House Tyrell. He transformed from a nobleman in name to a true noble with a large territory and castle. Even though Herrenberg was a devastated place, and he had never intended to truly occupy or manage it, his social status would greatly increase with the title of Earl of Herrenberg. He would be able to marry Lisa Tully and slowly take control of the valley. After all, dealing with a woman who loved him deeply and a sickly child was a piece of cake for a master schemer like Littlefinger. With John Arryn's widow and child under his control, the nobles of the valley would continue to obey the rule of the Eyrie, no matter how much they disagreed. Peter Baelish returned to his own brothel on Silk Street in a happy mood. He was prepared to call for the two most beautiful and skilled girls to relax his tense nerves. However, just as he stepped over the threshold, and before he could say anything, a black figure in a cloak suddenly came out from the corner and whispered in his ear, "Not good. My lord, I just received news. Lisa Tully was attacked a few days ago and died on the spot. It is said that the assassin used a terrifying red liquid. Just a touch of it will burn a person to ashes. The entire valley is in chaos. Some people are trying to block the news, while others are trying to control Robert Arryn." "What?" Baelish's expression changed drastically. His body swayed back and forth as if he were drunk. "My lord, are you all right?" The cloaked man saw this and hurried forward to support him. Peter pushed him away forcefully, his eyes bloodshot. He growled angrily, "Go away. I'm fine. Good. Very good. So this is your so-called gift. How dare you ruin my plans?" It was clear that whether it was Dragonflame or the meaningful words from before, they all proved that the mastermind behind this assassination was Zhang Cheng. To be precise, he had no intention of hiding anything from the beginning. He just wanted to clearly tell the other party that this was the result of continuously testing his bottom line. However, even though he was angry, Littlefinger did not lose his mind. He quickly realized that it was very likely that his previous actions had leaked the secret. So, he forced himself to calm down and ordered while gnashing his teeth, "Go. Immediately have those families that support me step forward to stabilize the situation. No matter what, we can't let Robert Arryn fall into the hands of others." "Understood. But what about you, my lord? Don't you plan to go there yourself?" The cloaked man asked with a puzzled expression. He couldn't understand why his master didn't immediately rush to the scene of the incident and instead chose to stay in King's Landing. "No, you don't know. To solve this matter, I have to meet someone first. Otherwise, similar assassinations will definitely happen again." Baelish took a deep breath and explained, "All right, I understand. Please be careful." The shadow bowed and quickly disappeared into a dark corner of the street. About an hour later, at the Red Keep's celebratory banquet, Zhang Cheng was eating all kinds of fruits and roasted meat while chatting cheerfully with the noble ladies and young ladies. Suddenly, Peter Baelish hurriedly walked in from the door. He forced a smile and said, "I'm very sorry, ladies. Can I borrow some of your time to speak with Sir Mason alone?" "All right. I hope you can hurry, Sir Baelish." "Yes. We still have a lot of interesting topics to talk about." The group of girls stood up and reluctantly left the southeast corner of the garden. Watching them leave, Zhang Cheng immediately raised the corner of his mouth and teased in a slightly sarcastic tone, Ha! Looks like you received my gift. How is it? Are you satisfied? Yes, I received it. It's really a very pleasant surprise. I think, is there some misunderstanding between us? Littlefinger clenched his fist tightly, the expression on his face constantly twitching. Misunderstanding? Ha ha! If an assassination can be called a misunderstanding, then I don't mind creating a few more such misunderstandings. Please remember, my dear friend, don't use the same trick you used on others on me. Otherwise, I can guarantee that this is just the beginning. Zhang Cheng didn't give any face to the other party. He made the topic clear. Peter Baelish, who was used to using all kinds of subtle hints to converse, was clearly stunned. He quickly put on an innocent look. Assassination? What assassination? God, why would I want to assassinate you? Oomph. Stop pretending, Baelish. Your lovely lady has already confessed everything. To be honest, I'm also very curious. What is your motive for doing this? To drive a wedge between me and the Lannister family? Or are you interested in the magical powers I have? With that, Zhang Cheng casually plucked a grape and put it in his mouth. Yana betrayed me? No, no, she wouldn't betray me. Littlefinger's eyes were first filled with shock, but he quickly denied this conjecture. Zhang Cheng spat out the grape skin in his mouth and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He replied with a smile, Of course she didn't betray you, but in front of me, all flowery words and lies are meaningless. I only used a little trick to make her speak the truth. Oh, right, this pitiful girl is being repeatedly ravaged by a group of thirsty mercenaries. Even if she's not dead, she's broken down. Do you want me to get her out and return her to you? After hearing this, Baelish could not help but shiver. He could feel a heartlessness and coldness from Zhang Cheng's attitude. As a schemer who was adept at manipulating people's hearts, he was most afraid of meeting such an opponent. Coldness and heartlessness meant that they would not be easily restrained by various emotions and would not be frightened by threats. What was even more frightening was that these people did not consider the consequences when they did things. Once they were angered, the danger was far greater than one could imagine. For a moment, Littlefinger fell into silence. He began to reflect on whether his previous actions had been too rash, resulting in a situation that would not end well. As for Zhang Cheng, he sat on the chair and ate the grapes expressionlessly, patiently waiting for Baelish to speak. Chapter 140. For a full 5 minutes, the two of them stared into each other's eyes without any intention of speaking. Until 8-clawed Spider, Varys noticed the strange atmosphere between them. He walked over and joked, Lord Mason, Lord Peter, are you communicating with your eyes? No, my dear friend. I just haven't decided what to say yet. Littlefinger shrugged, pretending to be relaxed. Oh, what kind of profound question can make someone as intelligent as you ponder for half a day? Varys asked with great interest. My apologies, but this is between the two of us. It's not convenient to reveal it to outsiders. Please leave and let us deal with it ourselves, Baelish said without hesitation. After all, this was related to many of his secrets. If the 8-clawed Spider found out, the consequences would be unimaginable. It would be the same as stripping him naked and sending him to his opponent. Varys sighed regretfully. All right, it seems that I've been overthinking things. Please take your time. If you need help, feel free to call for me. I'll be in the corner over there. Just as he was about to turn and leave, Zhang Cheng suddenly spoke. Please wait. Have a seat. I think you can join us in our conversation. What? Littlefinger's expression changed slightly. Relax, Sir Baelish. I just feel that the three of us are always probing each other, being on guard, and fighting against each other. It's much better to work together. What do you think? Zhang Cheng raised the wine bottle and poured a cup for the other two. Work together? Varys raised his eyebrows in surprise. Even in his wildest dreams, he couldn't believe that those words came out of Zhang Cheng's mouth. After all, ever since the undead had been following closely behind him, his life was in his hands. Why did he have to talk about working together? That's right, work together. Zhang Cheng nodded with a smile. First, let's be honest about our goals, or rather ambitions. I want to obtain House Tyrell of the Highlands. I want to research and decipher the magical knowledge left behind by the children of the forest. Lord Baelish wants the valley bottom and the northern lands. As for you, Varys, you want Daenerys Targaryen to return to Westeros and become the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. On the surface, there aren't any irreconcilable conflicts between us. At least, there aren't any at this stage. What are you trying to say? Peter asked with a frown. Any ambitious schemer would feel uncomfortable when their deepest desire was exposed, not to mention that this involved their hidden little secret. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. Isn't it obvious? As long as the three of us work together, no one in the Seven Kingdoms will be a match for us. That way, everyone will be able to achieve their goals as quickly as possible. But what happens after you achieve your goal? Varys asked a rather pointed question. Without a doubt, Targaryens is success. This also meant that unless someone was willing to give up their ambitions, they would become enemies sooner or later. Haven't I made myself clear enough? The prerequisite for working together is that we haven't achieved our goals. That's why we need to work together. Once someone achieves their goal, the partnership will end. I'm someone who hates trouble and don't have much time to waste. I hope the rules of the game can be as simple as possible. What do you think? Zhang Cheng suggested as he stared at the two most influential players in the Song of Ice and Fire world. As his research on the mysterious energy deepened, his free time dwindled. He didn't have the time to scheme all day. In truth, he didn't feel the need to train himself in tactics, nor did he need to make everything so complicated. The pursuit of endless knowledge and power was his foundation. Varys and Peter Baelish exchanged glances, a thoughtful look on their faces. It was clear that this suggestion was a great inspiration for the two of them. The two of them had maintained a strange tacit understanding since a long time ago. They didn't interfere with each other's plans. It wasn't until Eddard Stark came to King's Landing that this tacit understanding was broken. After hesitating for 2 or 3 minutes, Peter Baelish spoke first. If I agree to work together, can we write off the previous misunderstanding? Yes. Zhang Cheng gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. In any case, he had already achieved his goal of revenge. There was no need to hold on to it. To become a qualified player in the Game of Thrones, controlling one's negative emotions was the foundation of the foundation. If one couldn't even do this well, it would be impossible to win. In that case, I'm in. Littlefinger raised his wine cup and quickly made his choice. Count me in. Varys didn't want to fall behind. He raised his cup as well. Very good. Now let us drink this cup of wine and observe a moment of silence for our enemies. Cheers! May the Holy Mother have mercy on our enemies. The three of them clinked their cups and downed the contents in one gulp. Perhaps no one would know how great of an impact the temporary alliance between them would have on the entire Seven Kingdoms. Putting down the empty cup, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. In an instant, a green shadow flashed past the 8-clawed spider. With a whoosh, it drilled into the magic sword hanging at his waist. The damned eunuch only felt the coldness around him disappear. The long-lost warmth returned. How do you feel, my dear friend? Zhang Cheng blinked his eyes knowingly. Wonderful. Thank you for your generosity and kindness. Varys bowed deeply. Don't mention it. We're allies now. Remember, don't do anything that violates the agreement. Otherwise, I understand. Before Zhang Cheng could finish, Varys hurriedly promised. He had personally experienced the horror of the undead. He swore that he would never want to see that light green, translucent figure again. Now let's discuss how we should work together and get rid of all the obstacles in our way. Zhang Cheng spoke as he swept a mocking gaze across the nobles at the banquet, including Tywin Lannister. Chapter 141. 2 weeks after the Battle of Blackwater River, an army of more than 2,000 men crossed the Bitter Bridge and advanced along Rose Avenue. The leading knight held up a violet flag, which depicted a sword and a staff crossing each other. Many passers-by stopped to look at it, trying to figure out which family this was. After all, 2,000 soldiers armed to the teeth was not something that just any noble could afford. Not only did they have to own a large territory, but they also had to have sufficient financial support. Otherwise, just the high daily maintenance costs alone would be enough to drag down their finances. Unfortunately, even the most knowledgeable merchant would not be able to recognize such a strange emblem, let alone the young noble riding on the horse. Just as the crowd was pointing and whispering, an old man in armor suddenly ran over from the back of the group. He lowered his voice and said to the leader of the army, "Sir, House Tyrell of High Court just sent over 300 war horses, 70 carriages of food, 500 barrels of ale, for 100 longbows, and 100,000 arrows. What do you think we should do with these resources? Deal with it however you want. Don't worry, I will personally deal with the relationship with House Tyrell. What you need to do is control the army. You should know that we're not just dealing with the Florentine family this time. There are more than 10 other families in the area. They might not be a match for me individually, but if they work together, it will be troublesome," the young noble instructed expressionlessly. It was obvious that he was none other than Zhang Cheng, who was planning to head to Brightwater to take over his fief. As for the old man in armor, he was his loyal subordinate, Blanco. Ever since he formed an alliance with Varys and Peter Baelish, King's Landing had lost its attraction to him. He didn't want to participate in the infighting between Tyrell and Lannister, so he chose to leave the vortex of power and occupy a territory. He would slowly wait for Tyrell to be killed by the imps and for Cersei to detonate the cathedral. During this time, he could calm down and continue his research. If the situation permitted, he could even meet Daenerys and find out where House Targaryen's ability to remain unburned came from. If he had the time, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go north of the Great Wall and search for the remaining children of the forest. In any case, there were too many things worth exploring and researching in this world. Only an idiot would waste time in a power struggle. Understood. The old mercenary nodded and immediately called for a group of people to receive the supplies. Then, he urged the entire army to maintain their speed and continue moving forward. No one noticed that there was a black dot hovering in the sky. Passing through the beautiful courtyard, Zhang Cheng quickly left the main road under the guidance of the guide. He followed the small path in the southwest direction and approached Brightwater City. As the army had no intention of concealing themselves, the acting mayor of Brightwater City, Colin Florence, soon received the news and gathered the family members in the city to discuss countermeasures. After all, the Florentine family had lost more than half of their army in the Battle of the Black River. Now, they only had less than 400 soldiers left in the city. They might be able to maintain law and order and intimidate the bandits, but they would not be able to defend such a large castle and market. All of a sudden, everyone in Brightwater City felt threatened. Many cowardly fellows even suggested fleeing with their wealth and seeking protection from Stannis on Dragonstone Island. However, before the remaining members of the Florentine family could come to a conclusion, Zhang Cheng's vanguard, a group of 500 elite cavalrymen, arrived first and completely extinguished their thoughts of fleeing. Anyone with half a brain would know that 2 legs would not be able to outrun 4 legs, not to mention that they had to carry their wealth. Standing on the city walls, Colin Florence looked down at the cavalrymen who were taking turns to rest. He smiled bitterly and asked his trusted knight behind him, "Hossman, do you think we have a chance of winning if we choose to resist?" The knight, known as Hossman, hesitated for a moment and quickly shook his head. "I'm sorry, my lord. There are at least 2,000 of them, and they have the support of the Tyrell family and the Iron Throne. I think the best situation is to negotiate and try to get as much wealth as possible." "Sai, you are right. It seems like the Florentine family is going to lose the land that they have lived on for generations." Colin sighed helplessly. If he could, he really wanted to defend the castle to the death and use his own blood to prove the glory of the Florentine family. However, when he thought of the many women and children in the city, he immediately gave up on this plan. No matter what, he could still think of a way to get another piece of land if he lost it. However, if everyone died, he would have nothing left. After making up his mind, Colin immediately ordered his attendants to bring the conditions and contact the cavalrymen outside. About 10 minutes later, the young attendant returned safely and brought back news that he had to wait for the arrival of the master of the army. Just like that, the 2 sides faced each other across the city walls. It was only 10 hours later that the troops from the rear arrived one after another. When Zhang Cheng received the conditions from the Florentine family, he could not help but laugh out loud. As he laughed, he mocked, "Ha ha ha, this is too interesting. You actually want to take away all the gold, silver, jewels, and half of the livestock and food, leaving me with an empty castle. My lord, we think that these are reasonable conditions. Think about it. Brightwater City has tall and thick city walls, as well as loyal guards. If you choose to attack by force, it will take at least a few months to half a year, and more than half of your soldiers will die. But now, you only need to give up some of your belongings, and you will be able to obtain Brightwater City effortlessly. Isn't this good?" The young attendant bowed and asked with a serious expression, "Half a year? More than half of your soldiers will die? I have to say that you are really overconfident. Go back. Tell Colin Florence. Either you come out and surrender immediately, and I will allow him to leave safely with his family members, or I will kill my way in, and when the city is breached, everyone from the Florentine family will be executed for treason. Remember, I will only give you an hour to consider. After an hour, I will begin the attack." After giving the ultimatum, Zhang Cheng waved his hand impatiently and motioned for the guards to bring the attendant out. In fact, he did not intend to settle Brightwater City peacefully from the beginning. Instead, he intended to use blood to declare his rule over this land. This was because only war and blood could make people feel reverence, and reverence happened to be what feudal lords needed the most. As for those lords who purely wanted to use benevolence and fraternity to influence their people, they were either seen as weak and easily bullied or killed by the enemy early on. Chapter 142. How was it? Did the other party agree to our terms? Colin Florence asked impatiently as soon as the messenger returned to the city. Not only him, but all the members of the Florentine family also revealed nervous and expectant gazes. After all, to them, the more wealth they brought, the more hope they had of making a comeback. It also meant that their homeless days would be slightly better. Unfortunately, the young messenger shook his head and replied with a bitter smile, "I'm sorry, sir. The other party has no intention of negotiating at all. Furthermore, he clearly stated that we must surrender unconditionally. Otherwise, when the city is breached, all the members of the Florentine family will be executed for treason." What? How dare he? Damn it, is this guy a lunatic? Our noble bloodline can be traced back to the daughter of Green Handgarth. We are even closer to the Gardner family than Tyrell. We are the true masters of the River Bend area. Let's teach this arrogant young man a lesson. Yes, teach him a lesson. Then he will understand how to respect an ancient family with a long history. For a moment, the hall was filled with all kinds of curses and shouts. It was as if everyone had selectively forgotten how bad their current situation was. Looking at his family members who had completely fallen into hysteria, Colin Florence sighed helplessly and scolded loudly. "Enough. Since the other party wants war, then we will give him war. The Florentine family can decline, perish, but we must not tarnish the honor that has lasted for thousands of years. That's right. We have strong city walls and fortresses. Even if the other party has a large number of people, it won't be easy for them to break in. Once they suffer, they will naturally take the initiative to negotiate with us." A knight agreed with confidence. Just like this, under the command of acting Mayor Colin Florence, less than 400 soldiers were placed in the most important positions of Luminous Water City. In particular, the tall arrow towers were equipped with more than 20 archers. There were even 4 ballistae produced by the City of Knowledge. Even the heavily armored knights would be pierced through in an instant. Most people believed that with just a few arrow towers and sufficient food reserves, even an army of tens of thousands would have to pay a heavy price if they wanted to attack. The feudal lords of Westeros were keen on building tall and sturdy castles because of their strong defensive capabilities. They could offset the disparity in numbers and often only needed 1/5 to 1/10 of the enemy's army to protect themselves and their families. In any case, the larger the army, the greater the consumption of supplies. Once the war dragged on for too long, many of the conflicts and troubles hidden under the surface would be exposed. For Colin Florence, What he needed to do was not to defeat the army of more than 2,000 people outside the city, but to stall for time and wait for the situation to turn around. One had to know that the reason why nobles were nobles was not only because they control the land, but also because they had a complicated network of relationships. Take the Florentine family, for example. Just this generation alone was connected to the influential families of Old Town, such as Leighton Hyder and Randall Tully through marriage. Even though this relationship was not enough for them to keep their lands and titles, it was not a problem for them to ask for protection at a critical moment. It was because of this that Colin Florence did not hesitate to choose war and not surrender unconditionally. Zhang Cheng, who was far outside the city, saw this scene and couldn't help but laugh loudly. Ha ha ha! I didn't expect these idiots to be so cooperative. I really want to know, what gave them the courage to resist? Night, the main members of the Florentine family have fled back to Dragonstone Island with Stannis, so Luminous Water City should not have received any specific information about the battle at the Blackwater River. Their knowledge of you is limited to the army outside and not yourself. Blanco also explained with a smile. Normally, he would be worried about the price of besieging a sturdy castle. But now, he only felt that the people on the castle were very pitiful and sad. It would not be long before they would personally witness an attack that was far beyond their understanding. All right, the ignorant are fearless. I hope they can still maintain this spirit of resistance later. After saying that, Zhang Cheng waved to a mercenary behind him who had sworn loyalty to him. The latter did not say anything and immediately walked forward quickly. He knelt on one knee and bowed with an almost fanatical attitude. My lord, is there anything I can do for you? Go, bring down that sealed box from the carriage and find a few sharpshooters. I want to destroy those obstructing arrow towers first. Zhang Cheng calmly instructed. As you wish. The mercenary nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Not long after, he carried a wooden box with a white seal back to the original spot. At the same time, there were 5 archers with longbows following behind him. Zhang Cheng gently tore open the seal that he had personally put on the box. He directly opened the lid, revealing glass tubes that were neatly arranged inside. Each of the glass tubes was filled with a sealed red liquid. There was no need to ask to know that this was the dragon flame that he had created in his free time. Even a drop of it could instantly melt steel and stone. Are you going to? Blanco trembled as he asked cautiously. That's right. I want the dragon flame to burn all the soldiers on the arrow towers. I believe that after this round, the people of the Florentine family will understand that they have made a huge mistake. As Zhang Cheng spoke, he took out one of the bottles and tied it to an arrow with a rope and handed it to an archer. This young man in his early 20s did not waste any time. He quickly approached the castle walls under the protection of 2 shield-wielding infantrymen. Before the defenders could react, he released a fatal arrow. Buzz, accompanied by the sound of the bowstring vibrating, the arrow drew a beautiful parabola and accurately landed on the arrow tower on the east side. When the glass bottle hit the rock and shattered, the red liquid instantly came into contact with the air and released a dazzling bright flame. The next second, boom, the entire arrow tower turned into a sea of fire. Everyone who stood inside was swallowed by the flames without exception. Some could not even bear the pain of being burned alive and directly jumped down from a height of tens of meters to their deaths. After a short 10 seconds, the horrifying screams and wails stopped. Those with keen observation skills could even see that the black rocks around the arrow tower had turned red and melted. Chapter 143. As test tubes carrying dragon flames were shot into the target one after another, the tall arrow towers, standing in the 4 directions of Bright Water City, were like bright torches, constantly spurting out hot flames. Due to the high temperature, it didn't take long for even the surrounding stones to melt into liquid, slowly sliding down the outer wall. Colin Florence, who was originally full of confidence, had the expression on his face frozen at this moment. To be exact, he didn't know what expression he should use to express his inner feelings now. Fear, trembling, or regret, not choosing to surrender unconditionally just now. After the first arrow tower was ignited, he realized that he had made a mistake. It was just like how the Storm Kingdom didn't realize that the real strength of Aegon the Conqueror wasn't his pitiful army, but the 3 terrifying dragons. The enemy he was facing now wasn't the army of more than 2,000 armed to the teeth outside the city, but the owner of this army, a name and family that he had never heard of. Sir, what should we do? A knight stuttered. Just now, he had lost more than 80 of his most elite soldiers. For a castle with less than 400 people left, this was simply a precursor to collapse. The remaining soldiers didn't even throw down their weapons and run out to surrender, let alone fight to the death. They were already worthy of the Florentine family's salary over the years. Send out the messenger. Tell the other party that we surrender unconditionally. Immediately. Colin Florence clenched his fists tightly and made a prompt and difficult decision. When the knight beside him heard this, he instantly heaved a sigh of relief. He turned around and shouted at the young attendant, "Quick, hang up the white flag. Send out the messenger to tell the other party that we surrender unconditionally." Soon, the attendant in charge of the negotiation held up a white flag and was slowly lowered from the city wall in a gondola. But before his feet landed on the ground, an arrow suddenly pierced through the air and pierced his neck. He tried to cover the wound that was constantly spurting blood, but the blood quickly flowed into his trachea, causing severe suffocation. After struggling for less than a minute, he lay straight on the ground and breathed his last. There was no negotiation. There was no dialogue. There was no compromise at all. Zhang Cheng used practical actions to prove his attitude, which was to uproot the entire Florentine family and leave no future troubles. Looking at the eyes of the messenger that died with remaining grievances, Colin Florence slowly closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then he suddenly pulled out his long sword and roared, "Did you all see that? The enemy didn't give us a chance to surrender. If you want to live, listen to my orders. Even if you have to die, he had to die like a hero, not a coward." Before he could finish encouraging the soldiers to fight to the death, another voice suddenly came from outside the city walls. "Soldiers in the city, listen. This is the order of the king of the Florentine family." The Florent family that started the rebellion was extremely vassal and was immediately stripped of all their territories and titles. But now, my master, the new Earl of Brightwater City, Mason Asplin, officially announces that all members of the Florentine family will be executed for treason. If the ordinary soldiers put down their weapons now and let bygones be bygones, if they can chop off Colin Florence's head, not only will they receive a reward of 2,000 gold royals, but they will also receive Sir Mason's appreciation and promotion. Please consider carefully, because you only have 10 minutes to make a choice. After 10 minutes, anyone who continues to resist will not only be burned to death by the dragon flames, but even their families will be implicated. Accompanied by Blanco's hoarse voice echoing above the castle, the eyes of the defending army that was on the verge of collapse quickly shot out a chilling green light. Even though there were still disloyal knights and servants guarding Colin Florence, the hearts of most of the soldiers had begun to waver, and they even wanted to kill him. 2,000 gold royals was an astronomical figure for ordinary people. It was enough to buy a piece of land or a tavern, find a woman to marry and have children, and live the rest of his life in peace. On one hand, there was the threat of death, and, on the other hand, there was the promise of a high reward. Zhang Qing only used a little underhanded trick to cause the almost united defending army to fall into division, suspicion, and hostility. Perhaps he had been too affected by the world of the Song of Ice and Fire. Otherwise, if it was in the past, he would never use such a despicable method when he was sure of victory. Instead, he would directly crush the enemy with pure strength. But now, he was used to using more complicated and less laborious methods. It was difficult to judge which of the two methods was better, but the owner behind the parchment obviously hoped that he would follow the latter. Not long after, a rebellion came as expected. In order to survive and for the reward, more than 200 soldiers launched an attack on their former masters. With the advantage of numbers, They quickly slaughtered the knights and servants who were still loyal to the Florentine family. Colin Florence resisted desperately, but he was stabbed more than 10 times. In the end, even his head was chopped off, and he jumped on the city wall with a long spear. As for the other members of the Florentine family, without exception, they all died in the rebellion. Even the babies in their infancy were no exception. The only survivor was a beautiful girl about 16 years old. She was offered to the victors as a trophy to be ravaged and ravaged. Don't be fooled by the polite appearance of the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms. In fact, their hearts were full of cruelty, tyranny, and indulgence. Especially when they were controlled by their desires, they often committed many horrifying acts of brutality. Back in the day, Delina of the Florentine family was once a bridesmaid. She was raped by the king of Green Hats, Robert, and left an illegitimate son, Edric Storm. Half an hour later, Zhang Cheng sat on the main seat in the castle hall. With a smile on his face, he asked the man who was kneeling in front of him, who was also the first leader of the rebellion, "What kind of reward do you want, Bobby?" "Don't worry, no matter what it is, I will satisfy you, even including that sexy and charming noble lady." Really? The fierce-looking man turned around and glanced greedily at the girl who was hiding in the corner and shivering. Zhang Qing nodded with a playful expression. "That's right. Not only do I want to reward you, I also want to promote you to become a leader. You will be in charge of cleaning up the relatives of the soldiers and servants who are loyal to the Florentine family. Thank you for your generosity and kindness. I want her." After saying that, Bobby stood up impatiently and pounced on the screaming girl. Chapter 144. Seeing a helpless noble lady being violated by a crude and lowly man. Some of the soldiers and servants who had surrendered couldn't bear to watch. Some of them had undisguised disgust in their eyes, and some of them had a strong urge to join in. Zhang Cheng didn't say a word. He silently observed everyone's reaction and categorized them. Those who couldn't bear to watch meant that they still subconsciously sympathized with the fate of the Florentine family. They had to be careful for a long time and must not be handed over to them. Those who showed disgust meant that they still had a conscience and a higher moral bottom line in their hearts. They could be trusted to a certain extent and be entrusted with maintaining law and order, eliminating bandits, and so on. As for the last type, they were completely corrupted to the point of being dominated by desire. They didn't care who they worked for, let alone law and morality. As long as they had money and women, they didn't even mind committing atrocities. They were the ideal lackeys and thugs. Just when Zhang Cheng lowered his head and considered whether he should directly sweep away all the small nobles who were loyal to the Florentine family or take control of the surrounding areas, Blanco came to his side and asked in a low voice, "Sir, I don't understand. Why did you give such a generous reward to this traitor? What's wrong? Are you jealous?" Zhang Qing asked with a faint smile. "Jealous?" The old mercenary glanced at the white body that was enough to arouse men's endless fantasies and sighed bitterly. "Sigh. All right, I have to admit that I'm a little jealous. You know, that's a noble lady, and she's so young and beautiful. I used to dream of marrying such a woman one day. But you threw her to a vulgar soldier. I think you should at least keep her for yourself." Zhang Cheng sneered and shook his head. "Ha, no, you're wrong, Blanco. Perhaps for an ordinary man, lust for beauty isn't a big deal. But for a person in power, if he can't control the desire of his lower body, then his lust will become a fatal weakness that can be exploited by the enemy. From now on, you'd better learn to restrain yourself. Otherwise, even if I promote you to a noble, you'll quickly be defeated by all sorts of schemes and schemes. Also, what do you think is my purpose in rewarding Barbie?" Purpose? Blanco was stunned. Obviously, he had never thought about this before, and for a moment, he didn't know how to answer. "Yes, purpose. You have to understand that everything I do has a strong sense of purpose. Think about it. How many people will hate me after I eradicate the Florentine family? How many people are secretly waiting for an opportunity to overthrow my rule? But now look at the expressions and eyes of everyone in the hall. Compared to me, don't they hate Bobby more?" Zhang Cheng explained with a playful look. Blanco subconsciously scanned the hall and found that many people were looking at Bobby with eyes full of hatred. Some of them were even clenching their fists tightly, as if they could go on a rampage and kill him at any time. "I see. You want to use him to divert hatred," he muttered thoughtfully as he stroked the thick stubble on his chin. "That's right. But this is only the first part of my plan. In the next period of time, I will give Bobby a lot of power and let him do all the things that people hate on my behalf. When the hatred and enmity have accumulated to a certain extent, I will find a random crime and execute him in public. When that time comes, the people living on this land will no longer hate me, but be grateful and respectful." Do you know Gregor Clegane? Many people thought that he was a cruel executioner, but few knew that everything this executioner did was at the behest of the Lannister family. Remember, most people in this world are stupid and easily misled and fooled. As long as you master the method, you can easily control their emotions and even their actions. Zhang Cheng didn't have any intention of hiding anything, and openly told Blanco about his arrangement for Bobby. Even though this method of raising pigs and slaughtering pigs had long been used by the rulers of the Celestial Empire, it was still a small secret of very few rulers in Westeros. "Thank you for your teachings. I think I understand now." The old mercenary placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply, then looked at the man not far away who was venting his desires with a sympathetic gaze. He finally realized that the reason why the man was able to enjoy such an extraordinary reward in advance wasn't because he was going to be put in an important position, but because he was going to be used as a sacrifice to divert the attention of the people. Just like that, with the help of the guides among the surrendered soldiers, Zhang Cheng quickly occupied Brightwater City and began to count and take over the wealth accumulated by the Florentine family over the centuries. Apart from that, the army of more than 2,000 was also divided into 3 teams. One team of 600 men was stationed in the castle, while the other 2 teams of 1,000 men swept through the knight's territories within a radius of 150 kilometers. Zhang Cheng didn't intend to spare any of these guys who were at the bottom of the feudal pyramid. To be exact, he didn't think that these so-called knights were of any use at all. Instead of wasting time and money on them, it was better to recruit more mercenaries. As long as they had enough salary and food supplies, these guys' performance on the battlefield was impeccable. With the absolute advantage of dragon flame and the number of soldiers, the vassals who were originally loyal to the Florentine family were completely wiped out in about half a month, leaving only empty castles. In order to fill the vacuum of governance, Zhang Cheng rewarded these castles and the surrounding land to the mercenaries who were loyal to him, including Blanco, and promoted them to nobles. However, in order to prevent these idiots from making a mess of the territory, he also personally set up a small-scale bureaucratic system to firmly control the administrative and economic power in his own hands. When the news that the imp was going to marry Sansa Stark spread from King's Landing to Brightwater City, Zhang Cheng finally completed the integration of the territory. Although there were still a few rebels who fled into the mountains and forests, most of the areas had settled down. After all, for ordinary people, the new lord's means of dealing with the nobles might be cruel, but it didn't affect their lives, so they began to gradually accept the name Mason Asplin. Chapter 145. The body length is 6 meters, the wingspan is 8 meters, the thickness of the scales is close to 3 millimeters, and the largest tooth is more than 10 centimeters. I have to say, for a creature that was born less than 4 months ago, your growth rate is really amazing. Zhang Cheng said to himself as he checked the body of the dragon lying on the ground to make sure that it was not sick and to make a detailed research record. After this period of observation, he could basically confirm that the dragon could not be kept in captivity or else its size would get worse with each generation. This was because his dragon had been confined to a relatively closed environment for more than 90% of the time since it was born, but its body was still growing as fast as ever. Especially the unknown substance flowing in its blood. The proportion had increased from a few tenths of a percent at the beginning to more than 15% now. He could guarantee that if a spear, sword, or other cold weapon was stabbed into the dragon's body, it would melt into molten iron in a dozen seconds at most. Obviously, There was only one thing that really limited the dragon's lifespan and size, and that was the mysterious energy brought by the Crimson Comet. As long as there was enough mysterious energy, the dragon would not die naturally, but would continue to grow until it became a prehistoric beast with a body length of more than 100 or 200 meters. What was even more frightening was that he did not know if there was a genetic mutation during the modification process. But whenever Zhang Cheng got close to the baby dragon, a small part of the arcane energy in his body would be uncontrollably sucked away. Although the suction was not very strong at the moment, it could be avoided as long as he was careful. But for some reason, he always had a hunch that once the dragon entered Azeroth, where the air was filled with countless energy, there would be a huge change far beyond his imagination. Roar! Maybe it took too long to check its body, or maybe it was hungry, but in short, the baby dragon, less than a year old, stretched its huge head over, gently nudged its master, and let out a low growl of dissatisfaction. Okay, don't worry, it'll be over soon. Zhang Cheng did not turn his head and pushed away the dragon's nostrils that were constantly breathing out hot air. Just as he was about to bend down to check the dragon's claws, he suddenly remembered something and hurriedly turned to the impatient baby dragon and said, "By the way, since you were born, I don't think I've given you a name. As the saying goes, there's no time like the present. How about I give you a famous name today?" Roar! The dragon whelp was stunned for a moment. It stared at the two innocent eyes, as if asking what the hell was a name? Can it be eaten? A name is a code name. For example, you're a dragon, but dragon isn't your name. It's a general term for creatures similar to you. You must have a unique name, understand? Seeing the confused look on the little guy's face, Zhang Cheng had no choice but to patiently explain. The dragon whelp seemed to understand the meaning behind it and nodded slightly in agreement. Although its intelligence was still at the level of a 6 or 7-year-old human child, its ability to understand was not bad. It could even execute more complicated tactical orders. "Then what should I call you?" Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and began to search through his memories for famous dragons from various myths and legends, books, games, and movies. Very quickly, he locked onto one of them. What do you think of Kelba? It's a demonic dragon in Celtic mythology. It was summoned by the demon god Balor and killed many gods, including the god king Nuada and the goddess Maha. The dragon whelp hesitated for less than a second and immediately let out a series of roars of varying lengths, as if to express the joy and excitement in its heart. Hee, as long as you like it. Remember, from today onwards, you are Kelba. Don't let this name down. Now go out and look for food while it's dark. Remember to come back before the sun rises. I don't want you to be exposed too early." After saying that, Zhang Cheng patted the head of the dragon whelp, turned around, and walked toward the experimental device placed not far away. The reason why he dug the cave was not only to give the dragon a place to hide, but more importantly, to continue his research without being disturbed. Since he discovered how the dragon used the mysterious energy in the air to release flames, he had made good progress through simulation. At present, he could already use props to release fireballs, walls of fire, rain of fire, flamethrowers, and several other spells with strong destructive power. The only downside was that these spells required a lot of preparation time. Even the simplest flamethrower required more than 10 seconds to cast. Who knew how many times he would have been killed in battle by such a long time? Apart from that, the single damage attribute was also a big problem. At the very least, Dragon Mother Daenerys Targaryen and her 3 dragons were not afraid of fire. If it weren't for the fact that he only had 1 bottle of mana replenishing water left, Zhang Cheng would have made a trip to the north of the Great Wall to capture a ghoul for research. He wanted to find out how they used the mysterious energy to create ice. Of course, he could only imagine it now and didn't dare to put it into action. At the very least, he wouldn't act rashly before Kelba grew to 20 meters. In fact, all he could do now was to shorten the preparation time for fire spells as much as possible. At most, he would read up on the latest information on the children of the forest when he had the time. It had to be said that although the natives of Westeros had created a glorious magical civilization, They subconsciously regarded it as a religion, regardless of whether it was a complicated ritual or a eulogistic incantation. All of it was filled with respect and worship for the old gods. Since it was a religion and belief, there were naturally a lot of useless things mixed into it. It was harder than ascending to the heavens to differentiate between the parts that resonated with the energy and the parts that were purely decorative. After all, Dalaran was Zhang Cheng's starting point when he first came into contact with a mysterious power. Dalaran's attitude towards magic had always been to build a complete system and create stronger, newer, and more powerful spells through the combination of theory and practice. It was almost the same as the attitude of the people on Earth when they explored science. That was why, in his eyes, magic was a rigorous study, not a power that could be obtained by begging the gods. It was precisely because of this that he couldn't understand the thoughts and mentality of the children of the forest, nor could he decipher the misleading words and pictures. Fortunately, the children of the forest hadn't been completely wiped out yet. According to the plot, Bran Stark would encounter the last few remaining children of the forest. In theory, he still had a chance to obtain their knowledge and magical power. In order not to miss out on such important moments, he didn't hesitate to spend a lot of money to hire a large number of spies to send information to Lightwater. When Robb Stark, the last of the rebels, died in the bloody wedding, a raven slowly descended on the top floor of the castle. Chapter 146. Oh, that stupid woman has finally decided to abolish slavery? Zhang Cheng teased as he pushed open the door and walked out of the room. Yes, sir. Not only did she announce the abolition of slavery in Astapor, she even requested that all the cities around Slave Bay abolish slavery as well. Otherwise, they would have to resort to force. Currently, Yuan Kai and Mireen have entered a state of readiness for war. I believe that war will erupt soon, Scholar Inigo replied with a wry smile. As a scholar, his duty was to serve the castle and not a specific family. Thus, when the Florentine family was eradicated, he naturally turned his allegiance to the new master of Lightwater. However, humans had feelings. The scholar was obviously sympathetic to the Florentine family's plight, and for a long time, he had treated Zhang Cheng as a vicious and cruel lord. However, as he spent more time with Leylin, he found that this mysterious young man was different from what he had imagined. While he had been purging the rebellious nobles in his territory, he had not done anything to the commoners. At the very least, he had ignored the disgruntled peasants. This was not normal. On the contrary, most feudal lords could not tolerate the offense of the commoners. Once they found out that any peasant in their territory dared to criticize them, they would immediately demand that person see it. Of course, he did not know that the reason why Zhang Cheng did not deal with the disgruntled peasants was not because he was merciful, but because he did not care. After all, no matter how dissatisfied the peasants were with the lord, they did not dare to make any substantial resistance. They paid the taxes that they should pay, and the labor that they should do was not less. Their verbal venting was almost no different from the trolls on the internet in the information age. They were giants in words and dwarfs in action, and they posed no threat to the ruling structure at all. Zhang Cheng took the note from the scholar and quickly skimmed through its contents. He then muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Perhaps I should take this opportunity to meet Daenerys Targaryen." There is no doubt that the process of conquering Slave Bay was the history of Mother Dragon turning from a political idiot into a qualified ruler. So far, she had not tasted all kinds of betrayal. She was a young woman who did not know anything and had the characteristics of a strong idealist. It was the period when she was most easily deceived and fooled. "My lord, do you need me to prepare a ship for you?" Scholar Inigo had undoubtedly sensed something and carefully probed. "Boat? No, I have a better way to travel." "All right, go to your thing." Zhang Cheng smiled meaningfully, turned around, and disappeared at the end of the narrow corridor. After dark, a huge black shadow rose from the cave in the back mountain of Brightwater City and flew towards the sea. When it flew past the farm, many horses, cows, sheep, and other domestic animals cried out nervously. Some of them even ran around in panic, causing quite a bit of trouble. However, This had nothing to do with Zhang Cheng. He was already riding on Kulo Kelba, facing the slightly salty sea breeze as he soared through the boundless sky. With the speed of a dragon's flight, he would reach Slave Bay in 3 to 4 hours at most. He would then see the legendary Mother of Dragons with his own eyes and obtain the information he wanted. The only regrettable thing was that riding on a dragon's back was not as comfortable as he had imagined. This was especially so as the wind took away most of the heat from his body. In just a short while, Zhang Cheng's face had turned blue from the cold. Even though he was wearing a thick coat, he still could not withstand the cold. In order to not freeze to death during the journey, he had no choice but to lower his altitude and continue forward while avoiding the ships that could appear at any time on the surface of the sea. When the sun was about to rise, he finally saw land appear where the sea met the sky. Damn it, I'm finally here. I swear I will never ride a dragon for a long-distance journey again. Zhang Cheng grumbled through gritted teeth as he commanded the dragon to fly towards Astapor. This time, he had no intention of hiding his whereabouts and openly displayed the presence of a dragon. When Kulo Kelba's massive body passed through the downtown area, the entire city fell into a state of panic. After all, they had just seen Daenerys and her 3 dragons. Now that an even larger and more ferocious dragon had appeared, it would be strange if they could accept it calmly. Zhang Cheng ignored the commoners and headed straight for the tallest building in Astapor. Just as he was about to approach, 3 3-meter-long young dragons flew out of the balcony and let out ear-piercing cries at their own kind, as if they were sending out some sort of warning signal. But regrettably, Kulo Kelba did not care about these 3 little things at all. He flapped his sturdy wings and sent them flying before landing steadily on the spacious balcony. "Who are you?" A petite, beautiful woman with silver hair and purple eyes asked with a vigilant expression. Perhaps it was because she had just woken up. She was only wearing a translucent white silk nightgown. Her exquisite curves, twin peaks, and the mysterious area that made one's imagination run wild were clearly visible. "Ah, good morning, noble Daenerys Targaryen. I've suffered a lot in order to come see you. What? Aren't you going to invite me in and have a steaming hot breakfast?" Zhang Cheng jumped down from the dragon's back and kissed the back of her hand. "Answer my question. Who are you? Also, why do you have a dragon as well?" Daenerys instinctively pulled her hand back and furrowed her brows. She couldn't believe that someone else had hatched a dragon apart from herself, and one that was even larger and more dangerous than her own. "It's a long story. Why don't we go in and talk about it? Also, you can ask the loyal guard at the door to put down his weapon. Trust me, if I really wanted to harm you, I would have done so long ago." After saying that, Zhang Cheng glanced at Jorah Mormont, who was hiding in the corner. He walked in the house and poured himself a glass of wine. He urgently needed to drink something to warm up his cold body. As for obtaining information, that could wait. Chapter 147. As the alcohol began to flow through his blood, Zhang Cheng's pale face finally had a hint of redness, and his body gradually began to warm up. Even though he knew that this warmth was just an illusion, a side effect of the expansion of blood vessels, blood circulation, and increased calorie consumption, it was still better than before. He put down the empty cup and bottle in his hand and turned to the maid who barged in and ordered, "Go, prepare a mutton soup and 2 pieces of bread for me. If there's any fresh fish, stew one too. Remember, don't put too much spices. I like a lighter taste." Obviously, the maid was shocked by this unscrupulous attitude and hurriedly looked at her mistress for advice. But before Daenerys could speak, Jorah Mormont stepped forward and whispered to the maidservant, "Do as he says, Miss Sandy Eye. Also, tell the Unsullied outside to leave." "You know him?" Daenerys's eyes flashed with surprise. "Yes, your highness. Do you remember a merchant who said not long ago that a powerful knight appeared in the 7 kingdoms? Jorah Mormont asked in a low voice. Daenerys recalled for a few seconds and immediately nodded. "I remember. That knight is called Mason Asplin, right?" "He can't be." "That's right. My queen, the one standing before you is Mason Asplin, also known as the Invincible Mason. And according to the latest news, he seems to have cast a powerful spell in the Battle of Blackwater River and destroyed the cavalry that Stannis was so proud of. Jorah Mormont gave a selective account of the information he had just received from Varys. He wasn't sure why this person who was marked as extremely dangerous by the eight-clawed spider would appear in Astapor and ride a huge dragon. "You're that legendary Mason." Daenerys raised her eyebrows, a curious expression appearing on her face. "Legendary? Ha ha." Perhaps under the influence of the alcohol, Zhang Chung suddenly burst into laughter, shaking his head as he laughed. "Sorry, I didn't expect that I would become a legendary figure. After all, I'm not even 30 years old yet. According to the normal human lifespan, I should still be in the category of young people. So please just call me Mason. Don't add any modifiers or adjectives, or I'll find it funny." "Very well, Sir Mason. Can you answer my question? Why do you also have a dragon? Could it be?" At this point, Daenerys paused for a moment, the meaning of her words self-evident. As Valyria had been destroyed for far too long, the world had long forgotten that thousands of dragons had been tamed there. That was why the Targaryen family was the first thing that came to mind when dragons were tamed. It was clear that she treated Zhang Chung as a member of House Targaryen, or perhaps he had some House Targaryen blood flowing through his veins. After all, ever since House Targaryen became the master of Westeros, they had arranged marriages with many other families in order to maintain the stability of their rule. They even had many illegitimate children, so it wasn't strange for one to appear occasionally. Zhang Chung naturally knew what the other party was thinking. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "No, please don't misunderstand. I'm not related to you by blood, and I don't have your ability to stay unscathed. Strictly speaking, I'm just a normal person. I don't know if I'm lucky or unlucky." Daenerys clearly didn't believe his words. She turned around and glanced at Kulo Kelba, who was lying quietly on the balcony. "Then how did you tame a dragon?" As the mother of dragons, she knew all too well how wild dragons were. Even she couldn't keep Legolas, Viserion, and Drogon in peace. "Haha, before I satisfy your curiosity, can you satisfy mine in exchange?" Zhang Chung smiled and winked, beginning to take control of the conversation. After all, he hadn't flown across the sea to admire her beauty and figure, but to obtain some interesting information. "Of course, go ahead." Daenerys agreed without hesitation. "First, I want to know the specifics of the Valyrian apocalypse. As one of the few Targaryens who survived the disaster, there should be some records of it, right? Secondly, I want to know what's going on with your ability to stay unscathed. If it's convenient, can you give me some of your blood? Lastly, and most importantly, when you were incubating the dragon egg, did you find anything unbelievable?" Zhang Chung didn't hide his intentions at all, bringing up the three most pressing mysteries in one go. The Valyrian apocalypse was definitely not a natural disaster, such as earthquakes, tsunamis, or volcanic eruptions. It was the result of a mysterious energy going out of control. Otherwise, even the dragons wouldn't have been unable to escape. He even felt that the disaster might have been caused by a part of the Crimson Comet falling and causing an energy explosion. This meant that somewhere in the ruins, there was a pure energy crystal, a dangerous and valuable treasure. If he could obtain it, Zhang Chung would be able to create another energy source. He wouldn't have to worry about his knowledge and research going to waste when he returned. The Valyrian apocalypse? Daenerys opened her mouth wide in shock. After a while, she spoke in an uncertain tone. "I think I've heard someone mention it before. It said that the mountains within 500 miles erupted at the same time, pouring ash, smoke, and flames into the sky. Even the dragons weren't able to escape that disaster." "Why do you ask? Be more specific. What you've described is only the version that normal people have heard. I want to hear the version unique to House Targaryen," Zhang Chung urged with a dissatisfied expression. Daenerys shrugged helplessly. "I'm sorry. I've been on the run ever since I was born. I've never seen any records of this. However, I can tell you where to find them." "Where?" Zhang Cheng's eyes lit up. "Dragonstone Island. Everything related to House Targaryen's history is stored in the circular hall on the top floor of the Stone Drum Tower. If Stannis didn't throw them away, you should be able to find them easily. Daenerys gave him a straightforward answer. I see. Zhang Qing nodded thoughtfully. Chapter 148. After obtaining clues about the Valyrian apocalypse, Zhang Qing's gaze rested on Daenerys's half-naked body. After a full minute, he suddenly reached out and touched her forehead lightly. Instantly, a faint red glow appeared from where his fingers touched. Even though it wasn't particularly glaring, everyone in the room was still shocked. Damn it, what did you do to Her Majesty? Jorah Mormont was so nervous that he even drew his sword, his face full of anger and vigilance, as if Zhang Qing had committed some unforgivable crime. In contrast, Daenerys was much calmer. She asked curiously, "What did you do to me just now?" "Nothing much. I just did a little test to see what the truth of your so-called indestructibility is," Zhang Qing explained as he pushed Jorah Mormont away. He took out a small amount of gray powder from his pocket and sprinkled it in a circular pattern. In just a few seconds, he had drawn a circle under his opponent's feet. Just as everyone was wondering what these strange actions meant, the gray powder suddenly spun as if it was being controlled by some mysterious force. It spun faster and faster, and the area it spun around became smaller and smaller. The moment it touched Daenerys's fair skin, the red glow that had disappeared reappeared. Blurry green lines even appeared on the surface of her fair skin. Perhaps most people didn't understand what these strange phenomena meant, but Zhang Qing, who had systematically studied arcane principles, understood. The red light meant fire resistance, and the green lines meant magical constitution. In other words, the Targaryens were no longer humans in the ordinary sense. They had either been modified by magic or mutated under certain circumstances. In any case, their descendants had a very high chance of obtaining talents that ordinary people didn't have. Once fire resistance reached a certain level, they would become indestructible, while magical constitution would gain the favor of magical creatures such as dragons. Of course, the prerequisite for the awakening of these two talents was that the entire world had to be filled with enough mysterious energy. If the concentration was low enough, then the newborn wouldn't be able to absorb enough energy and naturally wouldn't be able to display their talents. After figuring this out, Zhang Qing took out a glass test tube and said in a slightly negotiating tone, "If you don't mind, can you give me some of your blood? Don't worry, I swear I won't use it to cast any evil spells or curses. It's just for some interesting research. In return, I will join your faction when you arrive in Westeros." "Sir Mason, don't you think you're being presumptuous and rude?" Daenerys frowned and glanced at the test tube that was as thick as a finger. This was the first time she had met a man who ignored her alluring curves and beauty and was instead interested in her blood. Zhang Qing shrugged nonchalantly. "Rude? No. I just don't want to waste time on meaningless topics. You should know that there are countless secrets in this world waiting for me to unearth. There are also countless pieces of knowledge waiting for me to learn. So please don't be too concerned about these trivial matters." Daenerys stared at the young man who was only a few steps away from her with her purple eyes, as if trying to see through his true thoughts. About 3 minutes later, a smile appeared on her stern face. "All right, I have to admit that you are a strange person, stranger than anyone I've ever met. But I can't deny that you're also an interesting person. More importantly, I don't feel even the slightest bit of enmity from you. But since this is the first time we've met, shouldn't you show me some sincerity? At the very least, you should answer my question first. How did you tame a dragon?" "No problem. My method of taming a dragon is simple. I sign a powerful magical contract with it when it's born. With this, I can make the dragon obey my orders and even understand my thoughts." Zhang Qing didn't try to hide anything and gave a straightforward answer. Apart from him, no one else in the Song of Ice and Fire could use arcane energy. Even if someone else knew about it, they wouldn't be able to replicate the process. "So the rumors outside are all true? You're a powerful and evil wizard?" Daenerys looked surprised. She couldn't believe that someone would reveal their secret so easily. "Ha ha, powerful and evil wizard. Is that how those ignorant fools describe me?" Zhang Qing laughed as he took the steaming hot breakfast from maid. Due to the sea breeze and his hunger, he didn't care about the gazes of the people around him and sat down to eat. Daenerys took advantage of this to put on a coat to cover up her alluring figure. She then sat on the other side of the table and asked, "You seem to be very disdainful of those who say that about you." "Of course." Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. "You know what? Actually, magic isn't an illusory force that can't be controlled by mortals, as many people think. On the contrary, it's just like growing crops, building ships, and smelting metals. It's a skill and knowledge." The birthplace of House Targaryen, Valyria, once grasped this knowledge. That's why they were able to tame dragons and create the unbreakable Valyrian steel. They even had the unique stonemason skills of Dragonstone Castle. Perhaps imperishable fire was a magic technique that the Valyrians had mastered back then. Your ancestors used it to pass down the ability of imperishable fire to their descendants. I'm a person with a strong thirst for knowledge and hope that one day I'll be able to uncover the secrets hidden by history. For example, why did the children of the forest disappear? What kind of supernatural powers did they wield? Why was Valyria destroyed in a single night? Why did the dragons disappear? Why did they die? Do the terrifying otherworldly ghosts north of the Great Wall really exist? For those who truly understand magic, it's not some illusory prophecy, nor is it a gift from the gods. It's a power obtained through exploration and learning. Chapter 149. It went without saying that Zhang Cheng's point of view was new and easy to understand. It was completely different from the magic users she had come into contact with before. More importantly, she didn't sense any strong desire, greed, or ambition in Zhang Cheng's gaze. It should be noted that as a princess of a fallen country who had been fleeing, wandering, and living under someone else's roof ever since she was born, she had more observational skills than ordinary women. In her eyes, the people who approached her could be divided into 3 categories. The first was interested in her beauty and body, the second was interested in her identity as a Targaryen, and the last was interested in the 3 dragons by her side. However, Zhang Cheng clearly didn't belong to any of the 3 categories, so he naturally attracted Daenerys' attention, or rather, her curiosity. Coupled with the fact that both of them had hatched dragon eggs, the distance between them had unknowingly closed. At the very least, the dragon mother subconsciously believed that Leyland was similar to her. Unknowingly, she began to let down her guard and relaxed into a casual conversation between friends. In the time it took to eat a meal, the 2 of them had talked about magic rule and then the current chaotic situation. Then, "Mason, what do you think is the root cause of the war in Westeros? Incest between the Lannister siblings? Or is it because Robert Baratheon is a despicable usurper?" Daenerys asked, crossing her arms and resting her chin on her hand. Hearing such a subjective question, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. No, neither. In the first place, the term usurper is most inappropriate to describe Robert Baratheon. Don't forget, even though he overthrew House Targaryen's rule, didn't your ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, use the same method to forcefully take over Westeros? If he's a usurper, then what are your ancestors? Secondly, Robert Baratheon's grandmother was a princess of House Targaryen. From a certain point of view, the blood of House Targaryen flows in his veins, and he has the right to inherit the Iron Throne. That's why the title of usurper, which is obviously insulting and contemptuous, can't be placed on his head. Remember, Daenerys, when evaluating a person, it is best not to put too much personal emotion into it. Otherwise, it will seriously affect your judgment. As for the criticized closeness between the Lannister siblings, it was only the beginning of the war. Believe me, even if Cersei does give birth to Robert's child, this war will break out all the same. In fact, the main reason why Westeros has so many wars is because of the feudal system. Daenerys widened her eyes in shock. She had never expected such a conclusion to come out of his mouth. "Yes, system," Zhang Cheng repeated without hesitation. In order to let this political idiot in front of him have a clear understanding, he patiently explained, "You don't know, right? Ever since the ancestors came to Westeros and built settlements one after another, the families of Westeros began to devour the surrounding land bit by bit to form villages and towns. As this method of development expanded over the years, it was inevitable that there would be all sorts of friction between the families. When the friction accumulated to a certain extent, it was inevitable that the ownership of benefits would be decided by force. As a result, the larger families would swallow up the smaller ones and slowly gain control of a certain area. You can simply understand this as the birth of the first lords. As more and more lords appeared, they quickly realized that the other party's power was on par with theirs. If they used force, it was likely that both sides would suffer and a third party would take advantage of the situation. To prevent this from happening, the lords began to form alliances and marriages, using blood ties to ensure their loyalty. In the end, the most powerful one was elected as the leader, which is what you would understand as the king. Even though your ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, used the power of dragons to forcefully destroy the original kingdoms and establish a unified country in name, he didn't fundamentally change this system. Let me give you a simple example. How much land and population can the ruler of the Iron Throne directly control? Probably only the area around King's Landing and the former territories of the Stormwind Kingdom. What about the rest of the land and population? They're all under the rule of other families. If House Targaryen could ensure that the dragons were able to hatch and grow normally, they might be able to maintain this fragile peace. But once the dragons are in trouble, the undercurrents hidden beneath the surface of the water will quickly erupt. Think about it carefully. In the history of House Targaryen, how many muddle-headed or cruel kings have there been? But why weren't they overthrown? Only your father, Aerys, overthrown? It's simple. It's not because of the crazy things he's done, but because he no longer has the protection of dragons. Without the intervention of magic or dragons, the lord who had more land, population, and food would be able to raise more well-trained and well-equipped soldiers, and these soldiers would become a force that could break the balance. Look at Westeros now. As the king, Joffrey only has a few thousand city guards. But what about the powerful lords? The Lannisters in the west have 40 to 50,000 troops, while House Tyrell in the Riverbend can also recruit more than 60,000 men. This means that from a certain point of view, dear King Joffrey is already a puppet who has lost his power. Neither the Lannisters nor the Tyrells treat him as a true king. Instead, they see him as a valuable chess piece. From his playful tone, Daenerys could sense that Zhang Chunk didn't have the slightest respect for Joffrey. On the contrary, he was full of contempt. It wasn't just Joffrey. House Tyrell and House Lannister were the same. After understanding this, a sly smile quickly appeared on her face. She suddenly leaned forward and blinked. Since you don't like the person you're loyal to, why don't you stay and help me? Oh, stay and help you? Zhang Cheng's lips quirked as he asked playfully. That's right. As you can see, I have 3 growing dragons. I also have an invincible army of Unsullied. It won't be long before I conquer all of Slaver's Bay and gather enough ships to return to Westeros. As long as you're willing to stay, I promise you'll get everything you want from me. Chapter 150. Looking at Daenerys' enchanting eyes filled with anticipation, few men would willingly reject such an invitation. Jorah Mormont even revealed undisguised envy and jealousy. He probably dreamed that one day he would be able to hear the queen he was loyal to say such words to him. But unfortunately, ever since Zhang Chang experienced the excitement of absorbing pure arcane energy, his immunity to female charms had basically reached the max. To be more precise, it was because the stimulation to the nerves and the brain was far more intense than sexual activity. Therefore, it was not easy for him to be aroused biologically. This also meant that when most men's hormones began to affect their judgment, their brains would still be in a clear-headed state. Unless someone used supernatural powers to affect their mind, in theory, they would not start to have feelings or strong desires for a certain female just because of the hormones secreted by their bodies. Even though the dragon matron had the stunning beauty of House Targaryen and a seductive body that Khal Drogo had developed, she exuded an aura that was a mixture of the purity of a young girl and the maturity of a young woman. However, none of that was of any use. Zhang Cheng merely glanced at the chaotic streets outside the window and said in an emotionless voice, "Sorry, but you can't give me what I want." Also, what can I do even if I stay? Watch you drag Slavers Bay into the abyss of chaos, announcing the abolition of slavery. I really don't know if you have any political knowledge in that head of yours. What do you mean? Am I wrong to free the slaves? The smile on Daenerys's face disappeared, replaced by a frown. She could tolerate others pointing out her mistakes, but she wouldn't allow anyone to overturn her ideals. No, there's nothing wrong with freeing the slaves. What's wrong is that you chose an inappropriate time and used an irresponsible method to free the slaves. Zhang Chung pointed out the most crucial issue. Inappropriate time? Irresponsible? Daenerys repeated his words, as if she didn't understand what he meant. Zhang Chung shook his head and explained with a smile, "The wrong time is when you announce the abolition of slavery before you have complete control over all the cities in Slavers Bay. Apart from letting the slave masters of the other city-states realize who their real enemy was and giving them time to unite and fight back, what benefits could you gain? I'm afraid that only the slaves have a little bit of gratitude, right? Anyone who knows a little strategy would first choose to unify Slave Bay, slowly eliminate most of the slave owners, and finally announce the abolition of slavery. But you are the exact opposite. As for being irresponsible, have you thought about how to fill the power vacuum after abolishing slavery? Have you thought about how to maintain trade and taxes after the slave trade was destroyed? Without enough taxes, how are you going to buy food and feed your huge army? Feed those hungry slaves? If you have not seriously considered all this, I can tell you that even if Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen were conquered by force, you would only end up with a huge mess. The slaves you liberated would starve to death because they didn't have anything to eat. Before they died, they would even resent you for freeing them. At least when they were slaves, they would barely have food to eat. Your army would slowly lose its ability to fight because you don't have enough money to feed them. You might even be bribed and cause a terrible rebellion. Due to the lack of stable power structure, many people would resort to unscrupulous means to fight for power and profit, even resorting to assassination, poisoning, purging, and other cruel means. In the end, those who climbed to the top were all ruthless and ambitious people. Do you really think you have freed the slaves? No, dear Daenerys, you are like a petulant child, crushing the nest of ants you do not like with one foot, without any regard for the survival of the poor ones within. You're not a qualified ruler, and you don't know what politics is. You don't know what the people at the bottom need. Perhaps you have suffered a lot and gone through a lot, but in essence, you are still a high and mighty princess, not a normal person running around for a living. All right, let's stop chatting after the meal. Now, please give me some of your blood. I have to hurry back. Daenerys was completely stunned by this analysis. She stood there without moving. For the first time, she realized that a decision she had made on the spur of the moment could lead to such serious consequences. For a moment, she sank into a state of self-reflection and self-blame. After a full 7 minutes, she seemed to have figured something out. She raised her head and replied with a firm tone, "Perhaps you are right. I'm not a qualified ruler, and I don't know what politics is. I have even inadvertently made many fatal mistakes, but I will not give up on freeing the slaves, nor will I give up on taking back the kingdom that belongs to me. Finally, thank you for your guidance. I think I know how to make it up to you." As soon as she finished speaking, the last member of House Targaryen suddenly pulled out a dagger and made a small cut on her finger, allowing the dark red liquid to slowly flow out. In the blink of an eye, the test tube was filled. Feeling the faint energy contained in the blood, Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed a hint of joy. He took the test tube and quickly covered it with a beeswax stopper before carefully putting it into his waist pouch. He then stood up and bowed slightly. "Thank you very much. As I promised before, if you one day lead an army to Westeros, I will choose to stand by your side. I will not go back on my word." "Huh, you are a strange person. A few minutes ago, you were still blaming me for my mistakes. Why are you choosing to stand by my side now?" Daenerys sneered and raised her eyebrows. She was clearly confused by his strange attitude. "What does it have to do with me, whether you are a qualified ruler or not? No, it has nothing to do with me. What matters to me are the commoners living at the bottom of society. What does their life and death have to do with me? To be honest, Even if you let the dragons slaughter the defenseless commoners, I wouldn't care. I only care about one thing, and that is to conduct research that interests me." With that, Zhangcheng walked towards the balcony. After all, he had already obtained clues about the Valyrian apocalypse, figured out the Targaryen bloodline, and obtained a bottle of Dragon Mother's blood. There was no need to waste any more time. Chapter 151. After leaving Astapor, Zhangcheng didn't immediately return to Brightwater. Instead, he went to Dragonstone Island in the east of Westeros. Using the cover of the night, he silently landed at the top of the stone drum tower. As Stannis hadn't given up on the island yet, there were still many guards patrolling around the castle. Fortunately, the recent defeat had caused their morale to drop to the lowest point. They weren't in the mood to carry out their duties seriously. After all, Dragonstone Island was surrounded on all sides by the sea. If any enemy wanted to invade, the only way was to use a large fleet to transport soldiers ashore. But if it was a fleet, it wouldn't be able to escape the eyes of the watchtowers. That was why the guards patrolling and standing guard were mostly just for show. Sensing the pessimistic mood that pervaded Dragonstone Island, Zhangcheng couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. He sighed softly. A single defeat has caused him to fall into such a predicament. It seems that Stannis hasn't realized that the true power he can rely on isn't those half-hearted lords, but Melisandre, a woman with strange magical abilities. But it doesn't matter. I'm only here to collect information. As he said the last word, he lightly patted Kulo Kelba's large head, indicating that the dragon shouldn't make any noise. He then climbed along the wall into the circular hall on the top floor to look for the bookshelf that Daenerys had described. Not long after, he found a simple wooden shelf covered in dust beside a large table that had a map of Westeros carved on it. Who knew how long it had been since someone cleaned it? The shelf was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs from top to bottom. Because it was close to the sea, the air was especially humid. Some parts of the shelf had already started to rot. A slight push would cause it to collapse. Zhangcheng carefully took down the books on the shelf one by one and quickly flipped through the contents. He found that most of the books were related to Targaryen history. There were as many as 5 biographies of Aegon the Conqueror. They weren't valuable at all. In the end, he found an old book covered in mold at the bottom corner of the shelf. From the words on the cover, he could vaguely make out the words, "Glorious Valyria." "Phew, looks like it's you." Zhangcheng heaved a sigh of relief. He casually found a chair and sat down. He began to read the history recorded in the book seriously. Soon, he was attracted by the contents of the book. As expected, Valyria was once a magical civilization, and many of the rulers had great supernatural powers, especially the legendary Valyrian steel. It was tempered with dragon flames, spells, and magic, just like the enchanted weapons on Azeroth continent. In the eyes of the Valyrians, dragons were nothing more than tame beasts. There was nothing to be surprised about. They were even more powerful and advanced than the children of the forest, and they could change the landscape according to their needs. Unfortunately, most magical civilizations would have a strong tendency to self-destruct when they developed to a certain extent. Just as Valyria entered its most glorious phase, a man named Weiss finally realized that the energy that permeated the entire world actually originated from the crimson comet in the sky. In order to ensure the continuation of the civilization, all kinds of magic energy would not disappear periodically. He made a bold decision, and that was to wait for the comet to pass by for a short period of time and dig out a meteorite from it. It had to be said that this plan was bold and risky, but for some reason, the ruler of Valyria chose to support him. Without any hesitation, Vaesa quickly made the necessary preparations, and the moment the crimson comet streaked across the sky, he activated a powerful magic ritual. A metal ball more than 10 meters in diameter, completely made of Valyrian steel, flew into the air and smashed into the surface of the crimson comet. With the violent impact, a piece of meteorite the size of an adult's head fell down. For a moment, everyone who knew about the comet was looking at the red light with joy. No one realized how dangerous it was. After a short few seconds, the moment the meteorite hit the ground, it released a blinding red light. The next second, the terrifying energy was released directly, and all the people, buildings, and livestock within a radius of tens of kilometers were all torn apart by the invisible shockwave, turning into a rain of blood and dust. Even the dragons were no exception. With just one hit, the city center of Illyria was completely flattened. No screams, no howls. There was only merciless destruction. Before the remaining Valyrians could react, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and tsunamis followed, swallowing the magical civilization in an instant. In the end, less than 1 in 10,000 survivors escaped, and the Targaryen family was one of them. As for what the meteorite looked like and where it was hidden, no one knew, and no one dared to look for it. At least, the Targaryen family did not have such plans. I see. Zhang Cheng closed the last page, a look of wild joy appearing on his face. If he guessed correctly, this meteorite should be a kind of energy crystal that had been forcefully compressed. Even a little bit of energy leaked out and could create a destructive force comparable to nuclear weapons. If he could get his hands on it, he would be able to greatly improve his eyesight. He might even be able to create a few powerful magical items. Just as he was thinking about how to find this treasure buried in the ruins of Illyria, a petite figure appeared in the hall. Are you reading? A young girl's voice came from the black figure's mouth. Zhang Cheng turned around warily and saw a little girl with half her face covered in black dead skin. She had a head of long golden hair and wore a white silk nightgown. Her 2 deep blue eyes flickered, as if curious and a little afraid. Selene Baratheon, Stannis' daughter. Zhang Cheng confirmed the other party's identity without much effort. After all, she was the only one in the Song of Ice and Fire world who could survive after being infected with the grayscale disease. With that iconic hard dead skin, it would be difficult to mistake her for someone else. Chapter 152. Staring at each other. The two of them stared at each other for about a minute before Zhang Cheng could no longer hold back his laughter. As he laughed, he replied, "That's right. I'm reading a book. What about you? Why aren't you sleeping at this hour?" I can't sleep." Selene Baratheon tugged at her skirt, squeezing out a voice that was as soft as a mosquito's. Due to being imprisoned in a sealed environment for a long time, her personality was very introverted. She would become nervous when a stranger spoke to her. "So you snuck out to find a book to pass the time?" Zhang Cheng teased with interest. Perhaps it was because his nerve had been too tense recently, but he suddenly wanted to tease this little girl who was not even 10 years old and relax at the same time. The girl nodded lightly, at the same time sweeping her gaze across the old book covered in mold on the table. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly noticed this. He casually picked up a copy of The Legend of Aegon the Conqueror and asked without raising his head, "Why? Are you also interested in the history of House Targaryen?" "No, I just like to read the stories inside." "Who are you? Are you my father's vassal? Why have I never seen you before?" Selene Baratheon blinked her eyes curiously. She obviously did not know that the person standing in front of her was one of the main culprits who had personally pushed Stannis into the abyss of failure. "I'm not your father's vassal. On the contrary, I am his enemy. Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Mason Asplin. I believe you have heard of my name before, right?" Zhang Cheng smiled as he placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. Selene Baratheon was obviously frightened. She hurriedly took a few steps back and turned to run. But for some reason, after running a few steps, she stopped and turned around. With an uncertain tone, she asked, "How did you get in? Where are the guards outside? Did you kill them all?" Don't worry. I came in through the window. I didn't kill anyone. In addition, I suggest that you don't alert the guards or servants. Otherwise." Zhang Cheng deliberately dragged out his words and placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. The meaning behind his words was self-evident. Please don't hurt them. I swear I won't tell anyone you've been here," Selene Baratheon promised, biting her lower lip. As a kind-hearted girl, the last thing she wanted to see was someone getting hurt or killed. She didn't want innocent people to be implicated. Seeing that the little fellow did not continue to try to escape, Zhang Cheng released his hand from the hilt and pointed to the chair next to the map table. "Sit down. Since you can't sleep, why don't you chat with me for a while? Anyway, there are still a few hours before dawn. Despite her fear, Selene Baratheon sat down obediently. Because she was too short, her two white and tender little feet were dangling in the air. As for her shoes, they had long been kicked to God knows where in the chaos just now. Fortunately, the temperature on Dragonstone Island was still above 20 degrees Celsius. Even if she was wearing a thin nightgown, she would not feel cold. Just as the girl was about to open her mouth to say something, Zhang Cheng suddenly stretched out his arm and touched the hard, gray, dead skin on her face. Ah! Selene Baratheon was like a frightened rabbit as she jumped up from the chair. After all, since she was young, almost everyone was disgusted by the scars on her face. Even her biological parents were no exception. Not to mention such an intimate action, many people would feel disgusted just by looking at it. Do you still feel the hard, dead skin? Zhang Cheng asked gently. The girl nodded, then shook her head. Most of the time, I don't feel anything. But occasionally, I feel a little itchy. Aren't you afraid that I'll infect you with the grayscale disease? Afraid? Why should I be afraid? Perhaps in the eyes of many, the grayscale disease is an incurable disease. But in my eyes, it's no different from other infectious diseases. I even have a way to completely cure it. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng took out a bottle of potion that emitted strong, holy energy from his waist pouch. Without any hesitation, he pulled out the stopper and dripped a drop on a half of Selene Baratheon's face. Instantly, a golden light illuminated the entire hall. The hard, dead skin around her eyes quickly fell off, revealing the bright red muscles and blood vessels within. After about 2 to 3 seconds, the area around her eyes had almost completely returned to normal. Apart from the tender, slightly translucent skin, there were no traces of the grayscale disease. Selene Baratheon bent down to pick up the dead skin on the floor. She cried out in disbelief. You cured the grayscale disease? How? How is this possible? Why not? Here, this is a mirror. See for yourself. Zhang Cheng grabbed the mirror beside him and handed it over, a meaningful expression on his face. Through the mirror, the girl could clearly see that the dead skin above her nose had completely disappeared. But there was still a large patch of hard, gray skin below her nose. Stroking the newly grown skin, she finally realized that everything that had just happened was not an illusion. She quickly raised her head and stared at the potion in the bottle with eyes full of desire. How is it? Do you believe me now? Zhang Cheng smiled as he waved the golden bottle in his hand. In reality, what he used was not some rare and precious magic potion, but the water of blessing that was sold in any church of the Holy Light in Azeroth. Its effect was also very simple. It was to expel most harmful diseases, curses, and toxins. It was very popular among the commoners, but its effect on magic damage was limited. Obviously, the grayscale disease was just a common infectious disease. It had nothing to do with magic. Otherwise, it would not have taken effect so quickly. Thank you. Selene Baratheon bowed in a proper ladle-like manner. Although the girl did not know why her father's enemy would heal her, and only half of it, she still felt that she should express her gratitude. You're welcome. Now, as long as you answer a few of my questions, I'll heal the rest of your body. Tell me, have you read this book? Zhang Cheng raised Glorious Valyria and waved it around. Selene Baratheon nodded without hesitation. Yes, I've read it. Then what about the other books on the shelf? Zhang Cheng pointed at the pile of old books on the table. I've read them too. I've read all the books here. The girl quickly replied. Very good. Then tell me, where do you think the meteorite that caused the apocalypse in Valyria is buried? If possible, can you point it out on a map? Chapter 153. According to the story of the Song of Ice and Fire, Stannis' only daughter, Selene Baratheon, had lived in the castle on Dragonstone Island ever since she was born. Furthermore, she had a quiet and lonely personality, and her only hobby was reading books. Therefore, it was very likely that she had read all the books that the Targaryen family had stored here. If there was anyone in this world who could deduce the location of the meteorite from the messy clues, it would be her. Many people, due to their age, had overlooked the knowledge in the head of this girl with a rough fate. They did not realize that she was very likely the last person to understand the history of the Targaryen family, as well as the huge secret behind it. In fact, Zhang Cheng did not realize the potential value of the little girl at first, but when he noticed the half of her face that had been ravaged by the grayscale disease, he suddenly recalled this point. If Celine Baratheon could find the meteorite, then he did not mind changing her originally tragic fate. After all, the story of the Song of Ice and Fire was divided into two versions, the novel and the television series. He was not too sure which direction the world he lived in would develop in. If it was the latter, then this lovable little princess would be burned alive by the deranged Stannis. Even though Zhang Cheng's heart had long since become incomparably cold and did not really care about the life and death of a little girl, if she could bring him enough benefits, he would not mind reciprocating a little. Celine Baratheon obviously did not know that her fate was about to change. She took out a map of the Summer Sea from the shelf and found the peninsula where the capital of Valyria was located in the south of the long summer land on the continent of Essos. Perhaps it was because she knew that the grayscale disease could be cured soon, or perhaps it was because this was the first time she felt the attention and importance of others. In any case, she was unusually excited and kept flipping through the books left behind by the Targaryen family. She then copied down the important sentences for comparison and reference. After about 10 minutes, the focus girl used a pen to draw a circle on a small island near the bottom of the map. She raised her head and shouted in joy, "It's here!" "Oh, can you tell me why?" Zhang Cheng resisted the urge to immediately mount his dragon and explore this area. Instead, he asked with an urgent look on his face. "It's very simple. First of all, according to Valyria the Glorious, the Valyrians held important ceremonies on this island. Secondly, Aegon the Conqueror had mentioned many times that there was a terrifying demon sealed within the ruins of Valyria, and privately called the island Demon Island. Lastly, and most importantly, if the terrifying impact described in the book is true, then with this island as the epicenter, the surrounding islands have all sunk," Celine Baratheon explained excitedly as she stood on her tiptoes and leaned over the table. "Demon Island?" Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a terrifying light. Without saying a word, he pulled out the cork and poured the entire bottle of blessed water on the girl's face. As the golden holy light flashed in the hall, Celine Baratheon's remaining gray skin fell off quickly, leaving behind a large patch of translucent red skin. Although it still looked a little scary, anyone with a bit of common sense would understand that in a few months, this new skin would slowly become no different from normal skin. Just as the girl was happily touching her smooth face, the outer door of the hall was suddenly pushed open, and a man with a thick beard and brown hair and brown eyes walked in. Apart from his thumb, the first joint of the remaining 4 fingers on his left hand had all been cut off by a sharp weapon. Zhang Cheng, who always liked to strike first, did not give the opponent a chance to react. He immediately pulled out the magic sword soul catcher and pressed it against the weak throat, warning, "I don't care who you are. If you don't want to die, it's best if you don't make any sound and don't send out any distress signals. Otherwise, I guarantee that this sword will immediately pierce through your neck." "Sir Davos." Celine Baratheon was obviously shocked. She quickly begged, Please don't hurt him." "Davos? Davos Sivos? You're the famous Onion Knight?" Zhang Cheng had a surprised expression on his face. He never thought that he would meet such a loyal person on his first visit to Dragonstone Island. Feeling the slight chill on his skin, Davos Sivos immediately understood the situation at hand. He obediently raised his hands, indicating that he had no intention of resisting, and began to observe the situation in the hall with the help of the dim candlelight. It would have been better if he didn't look, but once he did, he was scared out of his wits. As a criminal who had been involved in smuggling, he had seen all kinds of dangerous people. Some were sinister and cunning, some were greedy and cruel, and some were inhumane. However, he had never seen anyone who could compare to Zhang Cheng, especially the ice spikes that filled the sky during the Battle of the Blackwater River. It simply did not seem like something a human could do. It was also that scene that changed his attitude towards the Red Priestess Melisandre. At least, he did not impatiently want to kill her like he did in the original plot. This was because he understood that he could only use the same method to deal with someone who possessed such terrifying magic power. Otherwise, he would end up like the cavalry charging towards the city gate, unable to resist at all. "Good evening, Sir Mason. I am the Onion Knight. What brings you to Dragonstone Island Fortress in the middle of the night? Could it be that you want to learn from the despicable Lannister family and take a child as a hostage?" Davos pretended to be calm as he probed. "What I do has nothing to do with you. You just have to shut your mouth and stay where you are. Remember, my patience is limited. Please do not provoke it." After saying that, Zhang Chung used his other hand to pull out the knight's sword and threw it to the side. He then pushed the knight to the far right corner. After doing all this, he turned to the nervous Selene and said, "Relax, my dear princess. Let us continue our previous topic. If I bring you to Valyria, can you help me find the Demon Island and that mysterious meteorite?" "Yes." The girl hesitated for a moment, but still gave a definite answer. She was afraid that if she said no, then the poor Onion Knight would die on the spot. "Great. I believe that a kind girl like you would not refuse to come with me, right?" Zhang Chung said as he stretched his left hand out of the window and snapped his fingers. In an instant, a bright flame shot out from his fingertip, illuminating the dark night sky. Chapter 154. It had a huge body, sturdy scales, sharp teeth and claws, and two beast-like vertical pupils. Davos Seavos fell to the ground in fright when he saw the monster flapping its wings to keep itself afloat. He cried out involuntarily, "Dragon! Dragon!" "That's right. Allow me to introduce you to my dragon, Kulo Kelba. Do you remember the warship that caught on fire for no reason on the Blackwater River? That's all it's doing. Oh, by the way, let me remind you that it doesn't have a good temper, so it's best if you don't act rashly. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that its flames won't hit your face in the next second." With that, Zhang Chung stretched out his hand and patted the dragon's large and ferocious head. Kulo Kelba cooperated with him by opening its bloody maw. Flames flickered in the depths of its throat, as if terrifying flames would erupt at any moment. "My God!" Davos tightly grasped the amulet hanging around his neck, his eyes revealing an incomparably horrified light. He couldn't believe that he had brushed past a dragon. If not for his good luck, he would have sunk to the bottom of the sea with those unlucky fellows to feed the fishes. Ever since House Targaryen had used the 3 dragons to conquer Westeros, everyone had realized that dragons were a weapon of war far more terrifying and destructive than armies. That was why there were so many people who were infatuated with dragons in the story of Ice and Fire. The slavers of Astapor were even willing to use an army of well-trained and well-equipped Unsullied in exchange for a mere young dragon that hadn't even grown up yet. It wasn't that they were stupid, but they knew that once a dragon grew up, no Unsullied would be able to fight against a dragon that soared in the sky. This had been proven many times during the reign of Aegon the Conqueror. Only Dorne had barely managed to kill a dragon with his famous poison. Other than that, the traditional confrontation between 2 armies, or the siege and defense of a castle, was a joyous barbecue for the dragons. For example, in the Battle of Blazing Fury, King Loren of Casterly Rock and King Minjen of the River Bend joined forces to gather an army of more than 50,000 men. The moment the battle began, Aegon's pitifully small human army was defeated. But soon, Aegon summoned 3 dragons to join the fray, instantly burning thousands of unlucky soldiers to death. The remaining soldiers soon crumbled in fear and despair. A battle that should have been won by numbers was forcefully rewritten by the 3 dragons. Seeing the intense reaction of the Onion Knight, Zhang Chung smiled playfully. He turned around and extended his right hand to the shivering girl. "Come on, my lovely princess. Don't be afraid. I promise it won't hurt you." "Really?" Selene Baratheon's tone was a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Of course. Don't you want to experience flying in the sky while riding a dragon?" Zhang Chung continued to tempt him. Compared to forcefully taking the girl away, he preferred a gentler way. After hesitating for a few seconds, little Selene's curiosity finally overcame her fear. She pulled Zhang Cheng's right hand, stepped on Kulo Kelba's head, and sat firmly on the dragon's saddle. Seeing that the abduction was a success, Zhangqing also jumped onto the dragon's back, took off his cloak, and covered the girl with it. He then said to the Onion Knight in the corner, "Help me pass a message to Stannis. Tell him that I've taken his daughter away. As for when I'll return her, it depends on his performance. If he can rise again and become the master of the Iron Throne, I'll immediately send little Serene back to him. But if he fails, then I'm sorry, but this little one is safer with me." "Damn it, you can't do this. This is kidnapping." Davos mustered up his courage and scolded loudly. "Kidnapping? No, no, no. I think this is a form of protection. You don't know what kind of crazy things people who are obsessed with power can do. All right, I don't want to waste my breath on you. Just remember to pass on my message. Goodbye." As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng lightly kicked the dragon's neck. Kulo Kelba, who received the order, immediately flapped its wings and began to climb into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it left the castle far behind. A few archers who heard Davos shout tried to shoot at the dragon, but before the arrows could reach it, they lost their momentum and fell from the sky. Passing through the Blackwater Bay in the south of Westeros, the dragon flew west along the border of Dorne. When the two men and the dragon were about to reach Brightwater City, the sun finally rose slowly from the horizon, dispelling the last of the darkness before dawn and bringing light and warmth to the world. Little Selene tried her best to open her eyes wide, admiring the beautiful scenery before her. She was so excited that she started to tremble. After flying for a few hours, her face was pale from the cold, and her limbs were as cold as ice. However, this did not affect the joy in her heart. After all, compared to staying in the dark castle all day long, she wanted to go out and see the world, not to mention now that she was riding a ferocious dragon in the blue sky. Zhang Cheng did not disturb the girl in his arms, and quickly signaled for Kulo Kelba to fly towards the cave at the back of the mountain. Not long after, he appeared in the castle with the little lowly that he had abducted. "My lord, this is..." Scholar Inigo, who had just woken up and was eating breakfast, undoubtedly recognized Stannis' only daughter. He was so shocked that a spoon fell onto the table. "Relax. From now on, she's my adopted daughter. Do you understand?" Zhang Cheng lowered his voice and hinted. The latter seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly nodded. "Understood. She is your adopted daughter." "Very good. Let's continue eating. Let He find me while we eat. I have some things that I need him to do. Don't forget to ask the kitchen to make some hot soup and fried eggs, and send them to my room." After giving his instructions, Zhang Cheng took the girl's hand and returned to his room. As a cautious person, he knew that searching for the buried meteorite would not be an easy task. Thus, he had to make sufficient preparations and not ride a dragon to Valyria on a whim. In his plan, he needed at least an exploration ship, about 150 sailors and soldiers, as well as ropes, tools, food, water, oil lamps, and other tools that might be needed. Additionally, Valyria was a standard magical civilization. Even at the peak of the Targaryen family's power, the Targaryen family did not dare to go back and excavate the valuable treasures in the ruins. He had to be prepared to deal with supernatural forces. Chapter 155. Half an hour later, in Zhang Cheng's bedroom, Derry was standing respectfully, waiting for his master's orders. In fact, when he first accepted this job, he had never thought that he would one day be able to hold such a high position as a steward, nor did he expect that the young man in front of him would be able to climb from an unknown noble to a big shot who could attract countless people's attention in such a short period of time. Most importantly, with the Iron Throne's orders and merciless methods of purging, Zhang Cheng had eliminated almost all the stubborn forces in his territory. As long as there were no accidents, after 2 or 3 generations, his family would be able to take root in this land and slowly become a prominent noble family. If he didn't make any big mistakes, he could also use this important position as a steward to establish his own family. One shouldn't think that the daily chores were all servants with no status. On the contrary, only those who gained the Lord's trust were qualified to be stewards. This was especially true for cities like Brightwater City, which not only had a castle, but also a large residential area, workshops, and markets outside. There were only a handful of such cities in Westeros, and just the trade tax alone was not a small figure. Derry had been the steward for less than 2 months, but he had secretly saved more than 100 gold royals. Of course, this didn't mean that he was embezzling, but that the merchants who passed by took the initiative to pay extra protection fees to avoid trouble. In order to prevent being overtaken by other competitors, he had been very cautious and conscientious during this period of time. Every day, he would wake up before the sun rose and go to bed late at night, forcibly restoring the trade that had been affected by the previous war to a more prosperous level than before. "Derry, how long have you been following me?" Zhang Cheng, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly asked abruptly. "Soon, it will be half a year, my lord." Derry hurriedly bowed and replied, half a year? Time really flies." Zhang Cheng sighed with a smile. "Tell me, can I trust you?" Derry nodded without hesitation. "Yes, my lord. As long as you need it, I can dedicate my life to you." "Very good. I have a list in my hand. Help me prepare everything on it. Remember, try your best to keep it secret. I don't want too many people to know about it. Do you understand?" With that, Zhang Cheng handed over the list he had just made. Delhi didn't dare to be negligent. He took it and glanced through it quickly. A surprised expression appeared on his face. Then, he replied with a serious expression, "Please rest assured. In a week at the most, I can have these things ready and make sure no one finds out. But if I may ask, are you planning to go on an adventure?" "Yes, I plan to leave the territory for a period of time. At that time, the internal affairs will be completely handed over to you. You can understand it as a test to test your loyalty and ability. As long as you can meet my expectations, I will also give you a piece of land and let you become a true noble." "All right, go ahead and inform Blanco to meet me." Zhang Cheng waved his hand and did not reveal too many details about the expedition. To be exact, he did not trust anyone, including Derry. Moreover, that meteorite was so important that he would not easily reveal it to even his closest friends. After a short 7 or 8 minutes, the old mercenary came to the room and bowed with one hand on his chest. "My lord, you were looking for me?" "Yes. I need you to recommend me an experienced leader who can quickly deal with all kinds of emergencies." Zhang Cheng gave a straightforward request. Please allow me to ask, what do you mean by emergencies?" Blanco asked carefully. Zhang Cheng raised the corner of his mouth slightly and explained in a half-joking tone, "It means a talent who can calmly deal with dragons, sea monsters, or anything abnormal." Hearing this, Blanco's face twitched obviously. He then lowered his head and began to think. After a full minute, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm sorry. I'm afraid the person you want is not easy to find. I need some time." "Okay, I'll give you a week's time." Zhang Cheng also knew that there were not many talents like this, so he gave him a buffer period. "I'll do my best." Blanco sighed helplessly and turned to leave the room. Perhaps outsiders did not know what kind of person they were loyal to, but he was very clear that whether it was the mysterious magical power or the dragon that was kept in the cave at the back of the mountain, they were far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. So, the example just now was not as simple as a joke. It might even be true. Fortunately, this time he did not need to follow personally. He only needed to find an unlucky person to replace him. After all, ever since he became a noble, he did not feel that his life was cheap like before. His first reaction when facing danger was not to rush forward, but to hide as far as possible. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly noticed the change in the old mercenary, so he did not plan to bring him along. Just like that, the days passed. On the 7th day, a large warship that could carry a large amount of resources and people slowly left the port, heading towards the distant summer sea. Not only was there sufficient food and drinks on the ship, there were also a full 50 well-trained sailors and 100 well-equipped soldiers. All kinds of ballistae, catapults, and arrows were also available. There was also a huge dragon that was constantly circling in the sky. With such a lineup, not to mention exploring the ruins, even attacking a city would not be a problem. In order to be able to obtain the mysterious meteorite, Zhang Cheng could be said to have made sufficient preparations. If necessary, he would not hesitate to use the last bottle of well water that was filled with arcane energy in his waist pouch. Of course, The sailors and soldiers did not know the true purpose of this trip, nor did they know what they were about to face. On the entire ship, other than Zhang Cheng himself, only little Serene vaguely knew a little. But she was too young, so young that she could not understand the significance of this meteorite's existence, and what kind of disaster it could cause if it was obtained by someone else. The girl was currently immersed in joy. She ran from the bow to the stern of the ship, and then climbed up to the mast to look into the distance with her binoculars. From time to time, she would pick up a fishing rod and sit in a deserted place to try fishing. To her, these days away from Dragonstone Island were the best days of her life. There were no restrictions. There were no looks of disgust, and no one asked her to follow all kinds of etiquette like a lady. Chapter 156. My lord, your adopted daughter is so lively and adorable. She reminds me of the daughters back home. I remember the last time I left, she was about the same age. I'm afraid she's already grown into a beautiful young lady. I just don't know which bastard will take advantage of her in the end. A 45-year-old man with a thick beard lamented. He had wheat-colored skin, a result of being exposed to the sun for a long time. He had a burly and muscular body and 2 powerful arms. His right eye had festered due to an injury he had sustained in a battle, so his eyeball had been completely removed. He wore a black eye patch, and his appearance was basically the same as the pirate captains back on Earth during the Age of Discovery. Without a doubt, this was the leader that Blanco had managed to poach with great difficulty. His name was Eric, and it was said that he used to be the captain of a pirate ship. He had lost his ship due to the betrayal of his crew, and had no choice but to change his profession to smuggling. If there was anything good about this guy, it would be that he had a big heart. Most people would be so scared that their legs would go weak when they saw Clo Koala for the first time, but this guy was so excited that he even tried to touch the dragon's scales with his hands. It had to be said that even among the more daring pirates, he was a complete anomaly. It could even be said that he lacked the most basic respect for the unknown. But in Zhang Cheng's opinion, Eric was the ideal leader for this adventure, and also a qualified cannon fodder. Thinking of this, a playful smile appeared on his face, and he asked without turning his head, "How long have you been away from home?" I don't remember clearly. Maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years. Anyway, I haven't been back for a long time, Eric replied with a shrug. 4 to 5 years. Zhang Cheng turned around and looked at him sympathetically. It was as if he could already see a green grassland growing out of his head. Given the openness of Westeros, even if the husband left home for a few months, the wife could find herself a lover to relieve her boredom, let alone 4 to 5 years. She could even have an illegitimate child in 4 to 5 years. Ha! I know what you want to say, but I don't care. Because deep down, I yearn for adventure and all kinds of excitement. I'd rather die a spectacular death than die in bed like a normal person. Eric laughed as he spoke of his ambition. Hee. All right, now I know why you accepted my invitation. Zhang Cheng smiled and nodded. Although he didn't appreciate this kind of life attitude of using one's own life to find excitement, he didn't intend to comment too much. After all, everyone had different experiences growing up and had different attitudes towards life. There is no need to force others to follow their own values. Eric raised his head and looked at Kulo Kelba, who was now a small black dot in the sky. He replied with excitement, "That's right. The reason I accepted your invitation was because Blanco promised me that I would see many incredible and even terrifying things if I followed you. Although, I still don't know what you're looking for." Just as Zhang Cheng was about to say something, a large white canvas suddenly appeared where the sea met the sky. In less than a minute, warships with octopus insignia appeared in everyone's line of sight. The lookout at the top of the mast didn't hesitate. He immediately rang the alarm bell, shouting as he did so, "Alert! Everyone, prepare for battle. It's House Greyjoy's ship." Damn it, aren't the Iron Seeds invading the north? Why did they suddenly appear on the west coast? Eric's expression immediately turned serious. As residents of the Iron Islands who grew up in a barren land, they were known for their ferocity, brutality, and plundering. Almost every Iron Man was a qualified sailor or bandit. There were few factions that could defeat them on the water. It could be said that encountering the iron seeds at sea was the most unlucky thing. Not only would they steal ships and goods, but they would also rape and kill for fun. Looking at the giant golden octopus insignia on the flagship sail, Zhang Cheng pursed his lips. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. They're finally here? Yuluan Greyjoy. There was no doubt that according to the timeline of the story, the leader of the Greyjoy family, Baron, had most likely died in an accident. The new leader, Yuluan, had given up on continuing to attack the north where there wasn't much to gain. He was preparing to lead his army south and plunder the rich riverbend area. If nothing went wrong, his first target would definitely be the Shield Islands. As long as the Shield Islands were breached, the riverbend area would completely lose its protection and become the target of the Iron Islands' wanton destruction. Sir, please make a decision quickly. Fight, or turn the ship around to avoid them. Eric reminded in a low voice. No, we don't need to fight, nor do we need to avoid them. Tell the helmsman to sail straight over like this. With that, Zhang Cheng walked to the bow of the ship alone. He raised his hand and released scorching flames. The dragon in the sky noticed the signal sent by its master. It quickly swooped down with a sharp cry, turning from a small black into a massive creature more than 10 meters long. Just the strong airflow brought about by its flapping wings increased the speed of the ship abruptly. It was like an arrow leaving the bow as it crashed into the enemy's flagship. Yulin, who was using his binoculars to observe the situation, undoubtedly noticed the dragon charging towards him. He immediately drew in a cold breath and turned around to jump into the sea. He didn't think that his body of flesh and blood could withstand the dragon's flames that could melt steel and stone. However, before he could jump, Kulo Kelba suddenly extended its back claws and snapped the main mast of the ship. It then threw it towards another ship at the side, instantly messing up the originally neat formation. For a moment, the ships behind were forced to turn around. The scene was a mess. Taking advantage of the temporary chaos, Zhang Cheng's ship pierced its long ram into the enemy's hull without any obstructions. It made a loud noise. The people on the deck were like bowling pins as they swayed left and right. Some of them even fell straight into the sea. Yu Luan used his nimble movements to grab onto the reins in time. However, before he could regain his balance, a sharp long sword was already pressed against his neck. Good afternoon, my dear Yulin Greyjoy. I'm glad to have met you at sea, because it saved me a lot of effort. Chapter 157. Alan Greyjoy's flagship, the Serenity, was silent. It was not because the crew members were scared out of their wits, but because their crazy and cruel captain had already pulled out their tongues, all because the captain craved a little peace. Many people thought that Yu Luan had gone mad when he was exiled. Some thought that he had encountered something indescribable when he was exploring the ruins of Illyria. It was this fear that drove him crazy. However, Zhang Cheng felt that this guy was one of the few people in the Song of Ice and Fire story who had realized the truth of the world. In addition, he wanted to see for himself what kind of magic the legendary dragon binder of Illyria had to possess to be able to control dragons. It must be noted that even the beast-like dragons in the Song of Ice and Fire world were also terrifying magical creatures. Their scales and blood, which were filled with mysterious energy, were enough to resist supernatural powers. Zhang Cheng had tested Kulo Kelba's magic resistance using spells such as Frostbolt, Arcane Missile, Flame Blast, Icicle, and Arcane Explosion. The results were shocking. In terms of physical defense, dragon scales couldn't even withstand the piercing of steel spears, but they could reduce energy damage by 1/3 to half. Moreover, wounds healed very quickly. Usually, scabs would form over in 1 to 2 days, and new scales would grow out. This also meant that dragons had an unparalleled advantage in resisting supernatural forces. Ordinary magical items couldn't control them at all, unless, thinking of this, Zhang Cheng moved the sword in his hand forward, immediately drawing a red line on Yu Luan's neck. Glaring drops of blood slowly slid down his skin, dyeing his white shirt red in the blink of an eye. However, Yu Luan's face showed no signs of fear. He grinned and raised his head to ask, "You are the legendary Mason?" That's right. It's me. I heard that you found a huge horn in the ruins of Illyria. If you don't mind, can you show it to me? Zhang Cheng did not beat around the bush and asked directly. Ha ha. Why? Because you are pointing a sword at me now? If you think I'm one of those cowardly idiots, then you're wrong. Yulun puffed out his chest and laughed wildly. Judging from the crazed look in his eyes, he wasn't faking it. He really didn't care about life and death. Zhang Cheng quickly sheathed his sword when he saw that his threat had no effect. He stretched out his right index finger and shook it twice. Soon, a ball of bright fire was spinning between him. When the dragon in the sky noticed it, it immediately rushed to the nearest ship and opened its bloody mouth to spit out scorching dragon flames. In an instant, the ship was engulfed in a sea of flames. The sailors on the deck screamed and wanted to jump into the sea to survive, but before most of them could run to the side of the deck, their bodies were swallowed by the raging flames. Then, the whole ship began to slowly disintegrate and finally became a pile of garbage floating on the water. Zhang Cheng took a deep breath of the burnt smell in the air. He turned around and said to Yulun, who was half kneeling in front of him, "Do you know? In my opinion, everyone in the world has a weakness. Perhaps some people aren't afraid of death, but they always have something they care about. For example, some people think that family and friendship are priceless and are willing to give up everything for their family and friends. There are also people who value wealth as much as their lives and would rather die than hand over their wealth. As long as I can grasp these weaknesses, I can make these seemingly fearless people submit. As for you, I think these warships are your weakness. If you don't fulfill my request, then I will destroy all the ships in front of you one by one, and then embark on an unprecedented massacre on the Iron Islands. No matter if it's the elderly, the women, or the children, I won't let any of them go. I will make the Iron Men disappear completely. Don't think that I'm bluffing. I just happened to study the grayscale disease not long ago and got some blood from the infected while I was at it. Think about it. If I catch 500 Iron Men, infect them with the grayscale disease, and then throw them into an unguarded village, how fast do you think the infection will spread when they start going crazy? When the number of infected people increases to 1,000 or even 10,000, how many healthy people will survive on the Iron Islands? Now, I'll repeat myself. Hand over the dragon binder, or I'll show you the scenes I just described. As the last word was spoken, Zhang Cheng raised his right index finger and shook it twice. Kulo Kelba suddenly charged at its prey and set the second enemy ship on fire. When the remaining captains realized that they were no match for the dragon, they all turned around and fled in all directions. Yu Luan clenched his fist tightly, and his eyes were burning with hatred. After a full minute, he gritted his teeth and roared, "Enough! I can give you the dragon's horn, but you have to swear that you will let me and my fleet go after you get it." "No problem. I don't want to be your enemy. On the contrary, I want to work with you on a deeper level, such as ransacking the old town." Zhang Cheng gave a meaningful promise. "Oomph." Yulun got up from the ground with a cold expression and took out a huge horn from a large wooden box beside the mast. The horn's surface shone with a black luster, and it had the unique stripes of red-gold Valyrian black steel. Its surface was as smooth as a mirror, and one could even see a distorted reflection on it. More importantly, the stripes on the horn were engraved with runes that Zhang Cheng had never seen before, but they were emitting strange energy waves. Without any hesitation, he poured a strand of arcane energy into the horn, hoping to confirm the function of the runes through this method. However, the moment he poured his energy into the horn, the runes on the horn suddenly lit up. They first turned fiery red, then began to emit a blinding white light. Then, a loud noise reverberated on the surface of the sea, as if thousands of souls were howling at the same time. "Ah!" Yulun, holding the horn, let out a tragic howl. His entire body turned red, as if he had been burned, and large blisters even appeared on some parts of his body. When the ear-piercing sound stopped, a wisp of green smoke rose from the center of the horn, enveloping the dragon that was still hovering in the air. "Roar!" Kulo Kelba screamed and struggled with all his might, trying to break free from the smoke. However, For some reason, the more he struggled, the tighter the smoke became. Chapter 158. Interesting. Is this blood magic? Zhang Cheng muttered uncertainly as he bent down to check on Yu Luan's condition. The man who had been acting tough just a moment ago was now on the verge of death. His whole body looked like it had been boiled in boiling water. Not only was his skin a strange dark red, but was also covered with dense blisters. The largest one was the size of a palm, and it was filled with horrifying pus and blood. Of course, this was not the scariest part. The scariest part was that his mouth and internal organs had been severely burned by an unknown power, and the smell of roasted meat was constantly wafting out. According to the standards of modern medicine, his current condition was basically a death sentence. Even the most advanced medical technology would not be able to save his life. Fortunately, Zhang Cheng wasn't a doctor. He was a mage who had mastered alchemy. Without any hesitation, he took out a bottle of beginner healing potion and poured it into Yu Luan's mouth. A few seconds later, Yu Luan suddenly convulsed and sat up on the deck, vomiting violently. After he had vomited everything in his stomach, he raised his head and asked sternly, "Damn it, what did you do? Why did the dragon's horn sound on its own when no one is blowing it?" Relax, my friend. This is just an insignificant test. Even if I explain it, you won't understand. This involves profound knowledge of the resonance of different types of energy. All right, hurry up and give me the dragon binder. Then we can start discussing the matter of forming an alliance. Zhang Cheng purposely acted arrogant as he urged. After a short observation, he could basically confirm that this unique horn was a powerful magical item, powerful enough to control all the dragons in the Song of Ice and Fire. It was no wonder that Valyria had dared to let thousands of wild dragons hover over the city without fear of them suddenly attacking the citizens or livestock. The only downside was that blowing the dragon's horn required an unimaginable price. To be more precise, the person who used it had to have hot dragon blood flowing through their body. It was obvious that the temperature of dragon blood far exceeded the body temperature of a normal human by dozens of times, so even the blink of an eye could cause severe burns. As for the runes on the horn that he had never seen before, he needed to study and decipher them before he could figure out their specific functions. In fact, with the help of this huge horn, Zhang Cheng could already infer how far the Valyrian civilization had come in terms of magic. Although it was still not comparable to the magic kingdom of Azeroth, Dalaran, it was not as bad as it was now. In many places, magic had become something that only existed in legends. What was even more ridiculous was that not only did almost everyone who possessed magical powers not attempt to understand the source of their powers, they were also obsessed with prophecies like idiots. Among all the magic systems, prophecy was the least reliable and easily affected by all kinds of uncertainties. Instead of trying to decipher what would happen in the future through obscure phenomena and images, it was better to work hard to improve oneself and face dangers and difficulties with one's strongest side. For you? Dream on. I've already taken control of your dragon. Go to hell. Bastard. Kill him for me. Yu Luan raised the dragon's horn with a sinister smile, shouting orders at the dragons on the deck. Kulo Kelba stared innocently with its two eyes, as if it was looking at an idiot who had lost his mind. Although the dragon binder restricted its movements, it was unable to control its will. It was only because of the magic that it could not attack the opponent. Have you had enough fun? If you have, then hurry up and give it to me. Didn't your parents teach you to never try to control power that you don't understand? Zhang Cheng teased with a playful look. As the name suggested, the dragon binder was used to bind the giant dragon, using external forces to force it to submit. It was like humans using food to make dogs respond to orders, or using a nose ring to tame cows to farm. It did not directly control its thoughts. This also meant that the person who used the horn could make the dragon lose its ability to move or even kill it, but could not make the dragon attack its master involuntarily. Other than that, Zhang Cheng had also signed a permanent magic contract with Kulo Kelba. As long as this contract was not terminated, he would never have to worry about being attacked by his own dragon. However, it was clear that Yuluen Greyjoy had misunderstood the power of the dragon's horn. He thought that it could force the dragon to submit to his will, which caused the situation to become very awkward. The audacious Eric held back his laughter and suggested with a gloating tone, "My lord, I think we should teach this guy a lesson. At least hang him on the mast for a few days. Believe me, with the current amount of sunlight, he will kneel down like a dog and lick your boots in 2 days at most and beg for your forgiveness." Zhang Cheng hesitated for a moment, but quickly shook his head with a smile. "Sounds good. But the problem is that I still need this guy to do something that is not convenient for me to do directly. You have to understand that even if nobles want to eliminate each other immediately, they still have to follow certain rules. Of course, if you can find a replacement, I don't mind following your suggestion to deal with him." Replacement? Eric was stunned for a moment and immediately pointed to the captain of another large warship. "What do you think of that guy? If I remember correctly, his name is Victor Talion Greyjoy, the younger brother of Balon and Yuluen." Following the direction of his finger, Zhang Cheng quickly saw a strong man with a large axe in his hand, wearing heavy armor and a strange helmet on his head. At the same time, this man was also nervously watching the movements on the Serenity. After staring at each other for 4 to 5 seconds, Zhang Cheng quickly turned around and chopped off Yoluen's head with his sword. In an instant, dazzling blood spurted out like a fountain, and then the headless corpse fell to the deck with a plop. Because the whole process happened too quickly, no one had time to react. Especially the sailors on the deck who had their tongues pulled out. They all had expressions of disbelief. They probably couldn't believe, even in their dreams, that their fierce, cruel, and crazy captain would be killed so easily. "Sorry, my friend, you're no longer of any use." Zhang Cheng took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood on his sword, and lowered his voice as he muttered to Yuluen, who had just been devoured by the soul catcher.